like everyone is in attendance. Gus, you're with us, right?
Yeah, I'm here.
There we go. And I'll switch my screen so I can see everybody. There we go. Okay, so are there any communications, additional communications, Irene, that we need to be aware of?
No, there are no additional communications.
Okay, so at this time, we will go ahead and take public comment. Members of the public may comment on any matter that is not on this agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and members of the public may comment on items on the agenda when the subcommittee considers that item. To make a public comment, please use your raise hand icon on your smart device or your desktop, or dial *9 if you're using just your telephone. Irene, do we see any hands raised for public comment on items not on the agenda?
I see no hands are raised, Chair.
Okay. Well, I'll slowly scoot into approval of minutes as long as we don't see any more hands. So we'll go ahead and Mr. Mayor, had you had time to review minutes from our last meeting of July 7th?
I have, and they look fine. Thank you.
Yeah, they look fine to me as well. So that item is passed. And we'll move on to item 5, current items for discussion, and item A, presentation by OpenGov on government data platforms. Do we have an introduction from the city manager?
Madam Chair, pleased to present today a presentation by OpenGov. The representatives are here. I think Irene's probably going to bring them in as panelists if she hasn't already, and allow them to give us the overview of OpenGov and a more complete presentation than what was provided initially at the July 7th meeting, at which time the staff's request for the subcommittee members was to review the links that were provided in the presentation and familiarize yourself with the product, so that we were prepared to have an engaging discussion with Andrew Corsado and Mark Welch, as well as Megan Gagno and Tim Milton, if they're all available today for this presentation. But this particular platform is, is something that will enable us to build our budget, provide online permitting, and provide a lot of transparency with respect to our budget and our processes to residents in the community. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Andrew Corsado with OpenGov.
Great. Welcome, Andrew. And I'll put myself on mute as well and let you take over.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, you sound great.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you, Councilmember Bagby, Mayor Wolter, and Chief Ferguson for allowing us to present here today. David and Susie, I know we've met several times here, so excited to share a little bit more about OpenGov and how we might benefit Cloverdale. So really quickly, as an introduction to myself, my name is Andrew Corsado, account executive with OpenGov, and so I work with our Northern California cities and counties, including several nearby cities, Clear Lake, Yountville, Willits, just to name a few, and really just sharing how other cities are gaining value out of the platform. I've been with the company about 2.5 years. I'm not too far away in San Jose. And yeah, great to meet everyone over Zoom here. Wish we could do it in person. Maybe when COVID, if we ever figure this out, we can connect in person one of these days. I do have my coworker Mark on. Is there any way you can allow him to also talk here?
Yes, let me get him on here. Sorry about that. Almost there.
No worries.
Okay. Hopefully
And
Mark.
then Mark, let me know when you're.
Awesome. I'm here, Andrew.
Okay, perfect. Mark, do you want to give a quick introduction before we dive in?
Yeah, sure. So Mark Welch, solutions engineer. So I really work on the consulting side of OpenGov. Just a little background on me. I spent 15 years in local government finance before joining OpenGov. I was budget director for the city of Santa Clara, as well as finance director in Capitola, and then most recently administrative services director in Ashland, Oregon. So I work with our prospective customers and current customers, just making sure the product fits your needs, and then when you become a customer, making sure that you're getting the most value out of the tool. So I was a 5-year customer of OpenGov before joining the tool, and really changed how I was able to do all my reporting and analysis, and really the whole streamlining of budget development, and then most importantly, really helped our residents engage with us and really understand what was going on. So just excited to show you the product today.
Great. And Susie, I know you mentioned we should keep it to around 20 minutes or so. Is that still the time frame that you're looking for?
That would be
Not sure.
ideal if we could keep it under that 20 or under.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go through pretty quick then. And I know, just looking at the agenda here, just to review how we can streamline budgeting and planning, provide up-to-date information and dashboards. And then you had some questions on how we integrate data, where data is stored, and what would happen to that if you were no longer a customer, if we went out of business. So prepared to answer all those questions, and excited to share a little bit more about OpenGov and our cloud solutions. So just as a quick background to OpenGov, we are headquartered in Redwood City, California, founded in 2012 with the sole mission to power more effective and accountable government. We do provide quite a bit of software solutions to our local government customers. What we've been in discussions with David and Susie so far on have been for the budgeting and planning suite, the reporting and transparency platform, as well as the permitting, licensing, and code enforcement solution. And that's what we'll cover here today. We also do offer a cloud financial solution. So this is your back-end accounting system, really to help tie the whole platform together. So as far as what we've discussed so far with David and Susie, really the big areas of priority were to provide real-time dashboard data to council, department heads, and residents, improving the budget process, tracking and sharing CIP project status, increasing citizen engagement and transparency, and then improving strategic planning, as well as on the permitting and licensing side, really bringing that technology up to the 21st century to help allow residents to do everything online, from application to payment, and then for staff to have digital records for every application and for internal tracking. It kind of goes along with what we're seeing nationwide, is that the public sector is undergoing a digital transformation. We're seeing increased expectations from residents to provide self-service functionality. We're finding that a lot of cities and counties are utilizing outdated technology. And really a lot of our team came from careers in local government, as evidenced by Mark being on the phone here today, but even a lot of our founding team noticed that technology in local government tended to be 5 to 10 years, if not more, behind the technology that they were seeing in the public sector or in the private sector, your Fortune 500 types of companies. That became kind of the mission for OpenGov, was to provide really modern cloud-based technology for local governments to help run their cities more effectively and to better communicate information out to council, to residents, or to department heads. We do work with about 225 or so customers in the state of California, about 1,000 nationwide, including several of your neighbors. So Clear Lake, Ukiah, Willits, Healdsburg, and Yountville, just to name a few. As far as some of the results, and we reviewed this pretty closely with Susie and David, we do see this saving a ton of time, as well as helping cities really more efficiently allocate dollars and better plan for the future. So, Ukiah mentioned they saved over 600 hours creating their annual budget. They also allowed for a lot more collaboration from staff and department heads, as well as council as you're going through the review process in the budget. We'll see a lot of times just by really optimizing the way funds are allocated throughout the city that you're able to be a little bit more efficient. So Mono County reallocated over $2 million with OpenGov budgeting, just realizing that they were overfunding certain items for years and years. And then as far as building the public trust, Ashton did a great example of bringing residents into the budget process, also informing them on the strategic plan and the long-term vision. And then as far as the permitting and licensing side, really offering that online resource for residents to do everything, without having to go in the city offices. We are finding this to be a pretty big priority for our customers, especially during COVID, where residents aren't able to actually go into city offices to make payments or do plan reviews. And so we offer the solution that will allow residents to do that all online. Any questions on our background before we actually go into a couple of screenshots and walk through the tool?
Please proceed, Andrew.
Okay, great. So I'll pass it over. Mark will actually share.
Awesome. Really excited to talk to you guys and show you the tool. So what you're looking at right now is the OpenGov Cloud. So anywhere where we have internet access, web browser, we're able to get into OpenGov, and then we're able to have permission around everything. So right now I'm an administrator, I see everything. But a lot of our customers will break this down where city manager has their own dashboard, city council has their own dashboards. But we can have user-based security around all of this information. And so when you log into OpenGov, we're able to come to a dashboard. This dashboard is kind of that central location where we can come into the city manager dashboard. And this is where we're able to see financial information. So we're integrated into the financial system. We're pulling that data. We're able to see all the budget data here. We're able to track how we're performing both financially as well as non-financially. So those key performance measures we have or different metrics that are out there, we're able to bring them into OpenGov and get that quick snapshot. So we're seeing, monthly budget actuals. We're able to see building permits issued as well as police response times. So a lot of the different metrics that we want to know to keep us operationally at a high performance, we're able to bring those into OpenGov, add in targets, and really track how we're performing. We're also able to, and I'm just going to walk through a couple screenshots, so stop me, ask any questions as we go. Underneath all of this is more reporting where we can drill in and get even deeper into this data to understand what's going on. We're also able to streamline the budget process and create a central location for both administration, council to look at the data, really quickly come in and enter it and do all the reviews. So what we're looking at here is a list of all the proposals where we can come in and check the status and see which ones have been approved, which ones are not approved, as well as the ones that are still in progress. We can do our whole review process within OpenGov, so we don't need the paper copies. We give the ability to print everything out, but we're able to come in and really collaborate and do all our review in the tool. We're also able to create your workforce plan. So we know 75, 80% of personnel is coming, or of the budget is coming from personnel costs. So we're able to bring all that data into OpenGov and create forecasts and really see the impacts on budgets. You can see here, we're able to also have scenarios within the tool. So as we're building the budget, or we're looking at revenue hits or reductions or special projects, we're able to model those within OpenGov and get really accurate forecasts. We're also able to communicate this data out to the public. So we're able to do our workforce within OpenGov. We're able to do our budget, both operating and capital budgets within the tool. We're able to do all our reporting and analysis in OpenGov, but then we can also communicate that out and create quarterly reports, monthly reports, where City of Cupertino does a quarterly report This is how they're actually communicating all their financial information to their city council. We're able to create this web page. We can keep this internal if we want it just for our own use and people with passwords, or we want to download it as a handout, or we can make it public, which means, you know, people can come in and access this data. But City of Cupertino, this is their third quarter financial report, where they're able to give information to the community about how they're performing. We're also able to bring in images. So if you have a chart that you really like in another source, we can actually bring that into our page as well. But we're able to see, you know, key areas that they're focusing on as well. So instead of just getting tables and tables of financial data, they actually had specific categories within their financial information that they're really tracking. So we can come down, you know, and break down general fund revenue and expenditure trends and see how those are performing. We're also able to take the data and make budget books. So City of Clear Lake did their proposed budget within OpenGov. So same platform, just pulling the data that's already in OpenGov that we're already using for our analysis, bringing it in and creating a budget book. So City of Clear Lake proposed budget, they have their message. Residents are able to come in and quickly access this information, and they can drill into any of the departments. So if we want to go into city manager, we just make one click, and now we jumped into the city manager, where we're able to see how the, you know, information about the department as well as what we're budgeting. What's really neat in all of our online budget books, we can print these out, so we still have a hard copy, that historical record. But what's great is all of the tables that are in here, every user can have their own experience. And you know, a lot of people like this high-level overview. How are each of the major categories performing? But the user can actually open up and drill down deeper into our budget within the budget book. So no more, you know, going to our transparency side or calling finance or calling someone in the city staff to get down to this level of information. They can actually drill down to the lowest level within the budget book. So endless amounts of possibilities and endless data can be provided during the budget process.
Mark, this is
Yep.
David. Real quick, can you go back one screen to the where we had city manager budget up and they had travel training there?
Oh, this one. Yep.
Yeah. So what this enables council to do, if they have, for example, have a question about travel and training expenses by department, and in this case, it's the city manager budget, they could literally look at what the budget is, what's been expended to date, and get like a real-time report on expenditures relative to budget.
Yep, exactly. Yep, and it's updated nightly, so it's real-time data.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
And that's true with all expenditure items that are identified in the budget.
Correct. Yep.
Yep. I will just wanted to add too, I was just reading through the agenda for this meeting. I saw there was one item to show the costs of allocating police department overtime versus adding another officer. So that's exactly what our workforce budgeting solution might help with, you know, being able to run those types of scenario plans to say, you know, what would be the cost if we did this versus if we did another option. So the idea here is that, you know, as you're building your budget, you're really quickly able to create different scenarios and then review them with relevant stakeholders.
I just wanted to show a couple other examples. So this City of Ukiah, they did their budget book within OpenGov. This is a GFOA awarded, you know, Distinguished Budget Award recipient. It's also a CSMFO, so California Society of Municipal Finance Officers Innovation Award, where same idea, budget book where your residents can come in and really get a little bit easier interaction with the city. Same idea of a table of contents that we can link out and get even more information. We also can take that data, not just financial, but performance, and link that out as well. So this is City of Alameda. They have a lot of information around their police department and those metrics that they're tracking. So we can come in and embed or put our web development tool within your website. And so this is their annual arrest and traffic statistics. And here's the different categories that they're tracking. You saw this data on the internal side. We can keep that all internal, and we're just using it for our own operational decision making, or we can make it public, so they have all their arrest data publicly available, so people can come in and see how they're performing on all these different categories. I wanted to quickly
this was another one. Yeah, we noticed this was actually on the agenda for today as well. The idea of showing more transparency, whether it's police data or whether it's citywide. So really easy to decide what you want to share out to residents.
When we think about not only just transparency, so giving all that financial information, our budget online, this is our permitting licensing code enforcement PLC product, and this is just a website where your residents can come in and do permitting online. And so this is the home screen where we're able to come in. We can search for what we're trying to do. If we want to have like a fence permit, we could type in fence permit. It's going to pull that up for us to submit. But you can see all our projects are listed. And if we're thinking about opening a business, we just select it, and what the product's going to do is give us some introduction, so information around it. Maybe this is that cover sheet to your application, and it's going to walk us through the application itself. So what we used to do in paper or PDF, we're able to do now through an online interactive form. And so we're able to come in and select all the different parts, and this is actually creating a form for us. So this is creating that application for opening a business. Once we get done with that, we know there's a process that needs to be followed. So I'm going to jump from public submitting their application to what it looks like on the internal side. So this is the internal side of PLC, where we're able to see everything that's open. We're able to break these down into different categories. If I'm in building, I'm only going to see what I have access to. What I want to just quickly show you is each of those applications comes in, that puts it into a workflow process. And so for this example of a building permit, I'm able to get attachment information. I'm able to use Bluebeam, mark it up, make all my comments here. I'm able to get information about who's submitting it. But then you can see we're able to create a workflow. And this is a flexible workflow that can change. It's configured based on each of our applications. But if we go through a process and we need to add to it, we can do that. But you can see we have a workflow associated with all of our applications that's going to walk through. So for a building permit, we're going to walk through each of the steps. We're going to have inspections that are needed to be completed. Residents or whoever submits, contractors, whoever submits the application can actually request that online. They request the inspection. We're able to flow it in here to the administrative side and actually send the inspectors out into the field based on those requests. So really streamlining, improving the efficiency around not only residents interacting with you where they're able to submit it online, they're able to see the status of it online, but then also improving internally how we're able to process it and then finally do inspections and all those. And then we can also report on all that data that's in PLC. So you can see coming back into a dashboard, we're able to see how many inspections we have. We're able to see how many permits we've issued, break them down by type, and see how old they are. Any questions on what you've seen, or could I jump back into any of those areas?
I have quite a few questions, Madam Chair, and I'm not sure at what point, we should start asking them.
Yeah, do we want to take them by subject matter or maybe wait to the end?
Well, I think mine are more general.
Yeah, then let's hold the general questions to
Okay.
the end. And then, but if we have something, Andrew, is okay if we have something about a specific module, can we just go ahead and jump in?
Yeah, you can go ahead and jump in. And I think that was the high level overview. So I think, any questions. So Mayor Walter, if you have more general questions, I think now is a good time to ask too.
Yeah, okay, let's go ahead and give it a start then. Why don't you lead us off, Gus?
Okay, thank you. Well, let me see. I guess the first one is, what I see, I really like. I like the transparency of it, the ease in which it seems to flow. My question is training of staff, support, crossover. We do some things manually now. What's the crossover? How does that get into the system? And then I could see where a lot of it would interact with our city's webpage. You gave a few examples of that, almost to the extent where it might even replace it as well. And then I'm also concerned about security, hacking. I'm also I'm concerned about you going out of business. How do we recapture our information? It's almost to the point that we get too dependent on something like this, and we forget how to balance our checkbook manually, and all of a sudden the computer's down. What do we do? So,
Right.
but particularly crossover in training support, and like I said, the crossover of how far back do we go in our data? Do we go back to 16, 17 fiscal year and input all that information, or do you automatically go into the system we have now and pick it up?
Yeah, really good questions. Yes, I took down the training, the crossover, the data, the website, and then the security. So yeah, going through one by one. So training is something that we take really seriously for any new customer that comes on board. So we're not just gonna, give you the keys and say good luck. We really do walk you through the whole setup of the tool, how to use it. There's also folks like Mark who are former government officials who are helping leading the training and the deployment. And then, once training is done, you still have that ongoing support as well. So we have the support line that you can call into. We have a whole, we call it OpenGov University, but a whole kind of training courses online, via videos that you have access to. Then you also have a named customer success manager who would kind of know your goals, know what you're looking to do, rather than just a support person that's a one-off. So it is something that we really look to support our customers on. As far as crossover of the data, so that's something that we can pull in as many years of data as you'd like. Typically, we see 3 to 5 years as a best practice for pulling in your budget data, but we have some that go 20 or more. And what we do is we take the chart of accounts directly out of the accounting system that you have, and then we just pull the data over. So we take the historical in, and then daily with the integration, we pull in any new data that comes in. Does that answer the question on the training and the crossover of data?
You're muted,
I think
Gus.
you might be in.
I always have a problem with that mute button, but no, I can see where it's going to be very extensive training, and it's going to be rather time consuming. And also from a standpoint of, for example, Susie is our finance director, and then we have Irene, only because I see your face. Will they be able to jump into the system and do one another's work? Is it almost like, is there a tutorial that comes up with it? Or is Susie going to be the guru with the finances? Does that make sense?
Yeah, really good. Yeah, really good question. So the answer would be, it would depend on how you'd want that to be set up. So, if you wanted Susie running everything, we could configure the tool to be that way. However, what we see a lot of value in having departments being able to go in, run their own departmental budget. I know Ukiah, one of the examples that we sent in, they said they had about 50 users in the tool all managing their budgets. So you're able to, decentralize who's utilizing the platform. And there is training for all users. Maybe Mark too, if you want to add in, being a former customer, you can kind of share your experience with it.
No, yeah, I mean, what you said is accurate. So we're going to be there through the deployment, really train you on the tool. The big thing with OpenGov is everything we do is going to be in the user interface. So a lot of companies, a lot of software I've used. So 15 years, I've used quite a few different government technology through the time. We don't do any special coding. So when we set you up and we implement, it's all just configuring our software. So it's really user friendly. And like Andrew said, once you're set up, you're going to have dedicated staff on OpenGov side to work with you. And when we say that, we give you their cell phone numbers. So when I was a customer, if there was a question on the weekend, I called, and OpenGov's always there to help.
Mark and Andrew, could you touch on for Mayor Walter how the dashboards work on the city's website, and kind of the iframe technology, so that it's not as we discussed, it's not a static dashboard that we have to go in and manually update. It's continuous. So maybe if you could kind of just a brief overview on that.
Yeah, sure. Mark, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So in our platform, let me just I'm going to open one up and then I'll share my screen. We're able to, and this is just an example I just pulled up. This is where we actually set up those we call it a story. It's a web development tool where we come in and any of the data that we want to show, we're just able to come in and actually click add a section. All right. And what this allows us to do is pick what we want to look at. And what I wanted to show you was we're able to select the report, select the data that we want to see. But what we can do is come down to the bottom and tell us, how much do we want this to be updated? And so if we wanted live view, so all the data that's out there, the dashboards that we're able to give some narrative or just the raw numbers, we can do a live view, which means every time that new data hits the system, so it's nightly with financial information, or as we're loading in performance information, we can have that updated real time. So as new data hit, that's updated. Or we can do different things like snapshot, which means it's never going to change. So like that Cupertino example, it's a quarterly report. They don't want that data to change, so it's stagnant. And so we can pick those options. But as you were saying, we can actually, when we complete this, we actually give you the iframe language and coding to put right into your website. And so if I want to share it, we're going to give you the embed code. So here's the link, but here's the actual iframe language that I just have to copy and paste into the website. That answer your question?
Yeah, and yeah, and to kind of segue into the next question that you had, Mayor Walter. So we can embed those into any type of website. I see, just looking at the site and the notes, I know Cloverdale uses Civic Plus, so we're really familiar with them. I think it's probably the most common one amongst our customers. So we're able to work kind of seamlessly with the current website that you have. We don't, to answer your other question, we're not a full website provider, at least not in our current offering. But we do, like we said, we can integrate in with the solution that you have. And then the other one that you had on here was security and hacking. Definitely a really good question. So maybe Mark, you can go into it a little bit more, but we are hosted by Amazon Web Servers, and it is kind of top of the line as far as security goes. Mark, do you want to add in any other detail
only
on
thing
that?
to add, so AWS, so top of the line security around there. They're doing all their penetration testing regularly. All your data is also encrypted, so it's encrypted through transmission as well as at rest through AWS.
All right, any other questions? I had just a couple, unless there are questions or comments from staff or.
Can I ask real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Chief.
Andrew or Mark, when you talked about police administration and you had statistics on stops based on race and sex and things like that, does this align, and are you familiar with the RIPA requirement, RIPA? So that is Assembly Bill 953, which is going to be a statutory obligation for us to report these types of statistics based on Racial and Identity Profiling Act. Do you know, does this satisfy that? Do you have any knowledge of that?
I don't have knowledge of that bill specifically. So Oregon has a very similar program, I believe. We call it the STOP program, where a lot of that data has to be collected and shared, both legislative and publicly. And it does work. So in Ashland, it works, where they're taking the data. We have a third-party contract for dispatch. They're just taking the data, all those metrics of collecting, and loading it in OpenGov, being able to show all those different metrics.
Okay. And my second question is, we're not obligated based on our size of an agency to start implementing this until April of 2023. Did I hear you correctly in that whatever is provided at this point on OpenGov can be basically hidden from public at this point?
Yeah.
or open? Okay.
So everything within our tool, you decide how much is public.
Great. I really appreciate it, guys. Thanks for clarifying this.
Yeah, and I just to follow up, Chief, I wonder if we can either get that through the, a chief's organization or get that through the league as to, what our reporting, what will satisfy the reporting requirement. And obviously, what our timeline is.
Right. Yeah, well, we have to have some kind of tool, and that's kind of where I was going with this. If this satisfies that, if they knew that satisfies it, but that's probably something I can research.
Yeah, it's probably something we have to, or at least right now, we're responsible for. Yeah.
Right,
and then I guess I have a question for you, Chief, is that would most of whatever system that you're using for tracking right now, would it also be, would it work seamlessly with OpenGov? Maybe you don't know the answer to that, but maybe Mark does.
Well, I would assume, and maybe he can clarify me, we use a standard records incident management system. Mm-hmm. I assume you would draw from there based on the information you're providing, correct? That's exactly inputted by us. Yeah. And incorporated. Yeah,
so really any data that can come out in like a CSV format, Excel format, we're able to use. So most systems produce that, pretty standard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which system is that? Do you know the name?
What we use?
Yep.
RIMS. I believe it's Records Incident Management System. It's pretty standard in law enforcement.
Okay. Yeah, we're familiar with them.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not, being able to get a CSV file is still a manual procedure unless you've got it automated and you've got a way to hook into the database. So that's kind of, that we need to figure out where that's the case for pulling any data that we want reported. So I would want to know the answer to that before we choose which modules we're getting involved with, because then that's still, if you have to run a manual CSV export, that's still man hours or woman hours, as the case may be. So I kind of would want to know, it's like, where are we on our accounting system? Are there just hooks right into the accounting system that, we have automatic reporting? Is there automatic reporting on RIMS? And then anything else we would be pulling data from to produce this dashboard. I just would want to make sure. And then kind of a follow-up question, it's probably for Susie. I know that we recently acquired a financial modeling tool, and I don't know if he used the word modeling, but definitely doing, projections or what if scenarios was sort of, we asked them to move faster for their presentation, and they did. So thanks guys. But they kind of, whooshed past that part of the presentation. So I just kind of wanted to do you have a feel yet for any duplication or maybe are we talking apples and oranges for our financial forecasting? Is there crossover? Is it maybe a duplication? What's your feel for it right now, Susie?
I feel like there might be some duplication, but with OpenGov, it would be going forward, the numbers are going to be automatically updated as opposed to what we're currently using is all static. And then we say, okay, it might be a certain percentage more going forward or a certain percentage less going forward. This one would move with us and not static.
Yeah, it's live. Yeah, or can be. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's kind of my questions. Were there any other questions from staff or anything you want to wrap up, City Manager, on what the next steps would be?
Madam Chair, I think this is an opportunity for Mark and Andrew, if you're prepared to provide us an overview of your, at least briefly, of your cost proposal.
Yeah, sure. Let me go ahead and pull this up.
And again, if you're not a speaker, make sure to put yourself on mute because we are getting a little echo.
Okay. So let me skip over this. So the way that we do our pricing at OpenGov, it's all based off of government's overall budget size. And so, we have some large cities, large counties that are paying, upwards of 6 figures or 7 figures. We know that that's not feasible for a smaller size city. And so we base it all off of the government's overall budget size, and then we work off an unlimited user model and an unlimited data model. So we don't want to be one of those companies where, you get into a contract and then you realize a month in, like, oh shoot, I need to add 5 more users, or I need to pay for additional data, and now the contract is going up. So we work off of an unlimited user model and unlimited data model, as well as support is all included in the platform as well. And then we do a yearly subscription, and then a one-time deployment cost. And deployment is really just for us to get all your data into the platform, get you trained, and then setting up the initial reports for you, as we're kind of walking you through how to get things set up. So again, we do the yearly subscription, a one-time deployment charge, and then this does change depending on the length of the term. So, if we were looking at the 3-year rate, it'd be $29,320 annually. If we did the 5-year rate, that brings it down a bit to $24,922. And then what we've also done is, this would be specifically for the budgeting and planning suite. But if you did want to, at a later date, move forward with the permitting and licensing suite, there'd also be a credit towards that solution. David, was that the information you were looking?
That's correct, Andrew. I just wanted to ensure that the subcommittee had a perspective on the proposed rates for implementation.
And David, could you clarify, we're only looking at the budgeting and planning module? And what are we getting and not getting with that?
Well, well, I'll let Mark and Andrew speak to, what we'd be getting with that, the limits of the budgeting and planning. We certainly could pursue adding the permitting and licensing component to this, because that is an additional set of tools that I know the city has been interested in pursuing. And
actually, I think before even budgeting and planning, we were looking at trying to bring that online. So
that's right. In the hierarchy of processes, we were looking kind of first at the an online permitting, because of the situation we're in with COVID. Obviously, it kind of elevates the need to have an online permitting function or presence. But also given the this subcommittee's input and feedback on need for dashboards, and what we tend to hear more and more from the community is the need and desire for real-time data, particularly, for example, in our landscape and lighting districts, when they want real-time expenditures, which I know our staff spends a tremendous amount of time responding to. This is a particular solution that enables staff to point interested citizens, to our website to be able to get, really current, updated data. And there's a lot of time savings for staff associated with having that data readily available to the public.
So yeah, so I guess I have two questions then. One is, my sense is maybe that I might be wrong about this, but is it staff's sense that our volume on permitting is just not big enough to justify what the entry would be? And then just to kind of follow up on that, I guess what I'd want to see from staff and I'm assuming that my council members would agree, is that what they're going to want to see is very similar to what we saw on the slides about Willits and Ukiah and others, where we saved X number of hours, resulting in, this many dollars, so there needs to be, but especially in these times, there has to be a budgetary and time justification to show the value. And then, I just kind of I want that second or that first question answered, which is my initial sense accurate? Is it that you just don't feel like you'd get the value out of the permitting module at this time?
I think we would. I guess we would need to work more closely with Andrew and Mark to get a cost estimate for adding that module to the proposal. They have indicated, obviously we move forward, there is the $5,000 credit, so there is some cost savings to do it together. And it probably makes sense from a staff time perspective to be able to implement the two platforms or the two modules for the one platform together. I know Mark, Andrew, again, that might be something you can speak to. Obviously in terms of time savings, I think it's probably specific to each jurisdiction, but we could certainly look to, our similar sized cities like Yountville and Lakeport, and which are, relatively speaking the same size. I think Ukiah is probably, a bit bigger of an organization and may not be a direct comparison to get a sense of the savings, the staff and time savings. I know for me, in looking at our staff, they often, in order to access Springbrook, our current accounting software, to get budget reports, there's a process you have to go through to run those reports. You have to decipher the GL, and it takes a bit of time to do that. Where this is this platform enables kind of real time dashboard level data, so it can encourage our senior staff to really be able to access their department budget data really quickly and to get status updates. But obviously beyond that, to get that data for council. I know Mayor, for instance, you've indicated you like to see travel and training expenses, and I know that's just one metric you like to look at. We can customize this to the metrics that the council would like to see, and there's obviously a time-saving function there just by having those dashboards available for the council and or the community.
I just want to add, in terms of the permitting, I think we absolutely need it. I think our building inspector spends a lot of time issuing permits. It's inconvenient for people because the time is limited. Also, one of the things we've been talking about is we need to update our building permit fee, and it's well within our rights to add a technology fee on each building permit. It wouldn't be like a ton of money, but it would help to offset the cost of an online permitting system.
Oh, that's good information. Thank you, Kevin.
Well, it's funny.
Yep.
It's funny you say that, Kevin. I'm watching Mark run in and out of the building now, getting paperwork and meeting with the customer.
He's kind of at his wit's end a little bit. I'm feel bad for him, but trying to.
Yeah, it's a great. I gotta say, great point you bring up, Kev. Kevin. We actually just had another one. I'll send over the council memo they put together, but they actually calculated that a small technology fee would cover the entire permitting and licensing platform on every out year. So it was almost, the technology fee paid for the solution. So there wasn't any additional cost in the out years. So yeah, that's definitely an option and something that we see a lot of our customers doing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, just
that's the information
sorry,
we need to present to the entire council.
yeah, I
Okay.
mean, updating the building permit fee is a little bit of a chore. It's not a freebie. I mean, you have to do a study, so there'd be a little bit of upfront money, but it's something we need to do anyway. We haven't done it in a number of years, so it's on the list.
Yeah,
Okay.
the icons that you use on your presentation on page 11 are quite apt. I think everybody's feeling viced, the weight of the world on their shoulders, and ground down by Excel spreadsheets. And, I just raised another point. I mean, Gus has got a bird's eye view right now of, Mark going in and out. It's fine exchanging plans, getting signatures, all that kind of stuff on the front steps of City Hall when it's sunny and warm, but this is a completely different operation in February, when hopefully we're getting plenty of rain and hopefully we're getting plenty of wind. But I mean, it looks like we're still, going to be having, we have to plan for the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario is that we still have, limited hours or limited contact in the winter months. So we have to have an online solution for a lot of the operations. And that's, I'm sure we needed to talk with you before, but we really need to talk with you now. I would just add too, kind of when I think I mentioned when we were looking this over at our last meeting, is that I did talk to Mulhern in Ukiah, and they absolutely love using OpenGov for their budget process. So you guys got a you got a thumbs up from City of Ukiah. So
Oh, great to hear. Yeah, and I think you hit kind of what we're seeing across our whole customer bases, especially for, I think permitting is the most glaring one, where it's hard to process permits while people are being instructed to stay at home. But even for like your reporting and your budgeting for, times when staff can't all come into the office either, being able to do that online, we're seeing is being hugely valuable, as well as for, trying to do those scenario forecasts to say, shoot, like if we're in this for another 6 months versus for another year, what does that do to our budget? So we're seeing this being used a lot, especially just to help with the challenges that come with COVID.
right. So, and Mayor, you had some follow-up comments?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Not to belabor the point, but I think the ultimate decision on which vendor the city wants to use is going to depend on David and senior staff, which program they're most comfortable with. And I say that because this is the only program that we've looked at that provides this type of service at this point. David?
Mayor, staff has looked at other modules. I know Susie's participated in a number of other presentations. I don't know off the top of my head how many, but certainly this one, I think, floats to the top in terms of at least my mind. But I'm more than happy to poll city staff and get their perspective, maybe dive a little deeper with the team to make sure it's got all the solutions that we're looking for. One of the kind of software modules that is considered the gold standard is Excella, and Excella is a very robust online platform, but it's also very expensive, and it comes with a lot of server requirements and a lot of coding requirements. And so that's what I think makes OpenGov so attractive is that it is cloud-based, so it's accessible anywhere, with internet access. It doesn't burden the city with additional IT requirements. The Amazon, the AWS server, I think, has been identified at least, one of the top 2 or 3, secure servers. Much like our Springbrook is on a cloud-based server, so that's what has been a real savior for us in terms of being able to perform, payroll and accounting functions remotely. Has been that cloud-based accounting software.
Well,
And-
and that came up.
well-
We didn't need COVID for that to come up. That came up during the PSPS last
Right.
October.
Well, Madam Chair, that pretty much concludes my comments. I just wanted to give my opinion that the software that we pick is going to be up to David and senior staff.
I think
because-
you make a really great point, Gus. I completely agree. I mean, as a council, we set modernizing city hall operations and digitizing things and cost savings. That's one of our policy priorities, but how they carry it out, I'm sure that the other council members are going to want to be in and, bless the final decision. But yeah, we set the policy direction and staff really needs to choose the tool that's right for them. So yeah, I support that direction.
Yeah, and I know that our legal department will look at the indemnification requirements that we may have. Chief just brought one up on records keeping and how we have to report out. So hopefully all the I's will be dotted and T's will be crossed prior to us entering into a contract and make sure that everything is in place that we need. So
yeah, we pay somebody to read those user agreements,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, Mark, Andrew, I want to thank you for the presentation. Program is very impressive from what I could see. So I look forward to hopefully working with you. And that's about all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay. Yeah, I'd have to say I'd concur. And I think we definitely, especially if we can save some money up front, I'd like to encourage staff to move forward with the permitting module as well. That need has actually been mentioned at several priority workshops that actually predate city manager. And actually, am I right, David? And I think the county of Sonoma uses Acela for their permitting. Is that?
They
correct?
do, and we're we've looked into it because it is the gold standard, and
the supervisors were actually trying to look for a way that they could piggyback the small municipalities onto that license, and they just couldn't pull it off. It just.
That's right, and it's very costly.
Yeah.
Besides the IT, you have to have kind of an on-site IT department to really be able to take advantage of all the functions that it offers.
That's not realistic, yeah. Especially in light of our pension discussion we will be having later in the meeting. So I think, you definitely are headed in the right direction, and we look forward to seeing this at a council meeting. So great, good job.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Andrew, for your time. And I'm sure Susie will circle back with you, and we'll set up the time to discuss next steps.
Sounds great. And again, thanks all for letting us present here and welcoming us into the meeting.
Great, thank you. Right, and with that, we're going to move on. Does anybody need a break? Because it is that was longer than we intended. That was an hour. So I know we have a planning commission meeting tonight too. So maybe we need to rock and roll on to the next item. Item B, presentation by Hildebrand Consulting. Are they in the wings?
Sure. Irene, if you can invite them in, and I'll just do introduction. So the rate study that was last performed by the city was in 2016, and it included it was a 3-year rate study. So rates were adjusted in 2016, or excuse me, 2017, 2018, and 2019. And we engaged our former rate consultant, Bob Breed, to do an update. But Bob's moving into retirement, and his kind of right-hand person that he's worked with is Mark Hildebrand. Mark Hildebrand has kind of taken that initial earlier rate study work that was developed by Bob and worked with our staff to develop a water and wastewater rate model that would update the water rates going forward. And so with that, I'll leave it there and turn it over to Mark Hildebrand to walk us through his PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, well, thank you, David. Regarding the presentation, should I share my screen, or does the city have the presentation that I sent you, David?
We can work it both ways, Mark, whichever is easier for you.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share it. Let me pull that up here. Okay, can everybody see that? Great. Okay, and just given that the last presentation went a little bit over, David, how much time would you like me to target for giving the presentation?
Well, Mark, this is important. You know, I think, you know, take the time you need, but if we can kind of target about 15 minutes, I think that would be ideal.
15?
Yes.
50?
15.
15, okay. Okay, well, let's see. We have quite a few slides, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into it. The agenda here is to look at rate setting in general for water and wastewater utilities, for public utilities, and then dive into the financial plan for the water utility, and follow that with the financial plan for the sewer utility. So generally speaking, when we set rates for utilities, we take 3 steps. The first step is looking at the revenue requirements, which can also be called a financial plan. And that's really just looking at all the money that's coming in and all the money that's going out. So the majority of the revenue is going to be in the form of rates, which are collected from your customers who pay their regular monthly or bi-monthly bill. And then your expenses will be in the form of operating costs, capital costs, and debt service, generally speaking. We'll go over some of those details. The cost of service and rate design are really the cornerstone of what we call Proposition 218, which is the California law that dictates how rates can and shall be set in California, the legal requirements, and it basically establishes a proportionality requirement that the rates that you charge have to be proportionate to the cost of providing the service. And so when we do cost of service, we're identifying how much it costs to provide service, and then the rate design is looking at how we're going to structure the rates in order to recover those costs. Today's presentation is primarily, almost entirely, going to focus on this first step, which is the financial plan. We anticipate that the rate structure for both water and sewer is not going to change materially during this study. The last study was done in 2015. We've reviewed those structure and the cost of service premises behind it, and both of those hold up well with respect to your current costs. So we're going to be using the same methodology. The results will vary a little bit, but not enough to warrant a much of a conversation during today's meeting. So we're really going to focus on the financial plan, which is going to be talking about how much the rate revenue is going to need to increase in order to pay for future costs. Because of kind of a fast schedule here, I'm going to skip over this slide describing the legal requirements. But again, the legal requirements for setting rates really focuses on a requirement that the utility not charge more than the cost of providing service. It's a very hot topic. in our industry, there have been a lot of lawsuits in the last 10 years, a lot of major court cases that have been discussed quite a bit, and a lot more scrutiny on utilities to make sure that they comply with the law and with the case law that has followed more recently. Here's a diagram of your water utility, and this just sort of gives a visual of what I was talking about with the financial plan earlier. The green boxes on the left show your revenue sources. It's not, these aren't exactly to scale, but I wanted to give a sense of scale that your rate revenue is your biggest source of revenue. And then you also have some other operating revenue, interest earnings, capacity fees are what are paid by developers when they join the system. And occasionally you receive debt proceeds or grants. That goes into two separate funds. There's an operating fund, which focuses on paying for operating costs and debt service. And then your capital fund, which focuses on paying for capital projects. So focusing on the water utility here, here's the beginning fund balance. So when we start the study, we look to see how much cash you have in reserves. You currently have about $2.2 million in unrestricted cash in the water enterprise. Here are some numbers regarding the amount of revenue that you have on the water side. So about 86% of your revenue comes from rate revenue. Again, this is the source of revenue that's being discussed today. These other sources of revenue will not be affected by the rate increases that are being described. So the impact fees, again, are from developers. And then you have a transfer in from the general fund to help pay for your retirement costs. On the other side of the equation, here are the operating costs and debt service. So you can see about 37% are for salaries and benefits, about 15% for debt service. The transfer out is a transfer out to the general fund to pay for administrative support. And then there's a variety of other costs there. So that's a total of 3.37 million. What's really important to understand about this graph is this isn't all of your costs. This is your operating costs and your debt service. This does not include the cost of capital, which is the big, these expenses don't move much. You can try to sharpen the pencil and find ways to adjust your budget, but there really isn't much wiggle room on this part of the expenses. The capital spending is the area where costs can be deferred or accelerated, or timing can be changed. And so that's what we're going to focus on here today. So here's the capital spending. I showed the historical capital spending here for the past 5 years, and then the forecasted capital spending. And what you can see is that historically, it's been an average of about $1 million per year. And almost all of that happened in 2016. I believe it was a SCADA upgrade. David, could you nod? I think it was, yeah, SCADA. It was a major project that happened in 2016. So without that project, essentially no capital spending has occurred on the water side, which means that a lot of repair and replacement of aging infrastructure has been deferred for quite some time. So the program that you're looking for the next 10 years is looking to address that deferred maintenance. And there's David and the staff has worked to put together a capital program that's going to address the city's biggest needs, and they continue to work on that capital program with their consultant, GHD. So the average is going to increase to about $3 million a year. So that's a big increase in annual capital spending, and you're going to see that as we look at what the rate increases are going to need to be in order to afford this level of capital spending in order to address deferred capital spending or deferred maintenance. So again, because of tight time, I'm not going to spend much time, but this provides detail on what all those projects are in case you're interested. This presentation is available to you, so you can take a look at that after the meeting if you're interested in what projects specifically are being proposed over that time period. One last piece of the equation before I look at the whole picture are your reserves and how much you should keep in your reserves as a policy. There are two existing reserves. There's one that's called your contingency reserve, and that's really to keep money in the bank in the event of a significant change in operating costs. So the city currently keeps about 25% of your annual operating budget, which is consistent with industry standard. So that's about $650,000. And then the replacement reserve is essentially addressing the volatility. If I go back to this slide here, you can see that the capital spending in the future still has pretty significant swings. You know, one year it may be $1.5 million, and another year it may be $6 million. So in order to address that volatility in capital spending, it's good to have a reserve called your replacement reserve, which allows you to draw down on the reserve during years when you have a spike in capital spending and build it back up during years when you have lower than average capital spending. So we are proposing to have about $3 million in capital spending, which is your average capital spending per year going forward. Right now, you have $1.5 million. So we're looking to build up that reserve in order to address this coming capital program. So this is sorry for going quite quickly through all that, but this slide essentially contains all the information that I just described and puts it all together in a format where we can see what it's going to look like for the next 10 years. So in this particular graph, this is a scenario that's not being recommended, but simply for illustrative purposes, we're showing what would happen if no rate increases happened at all, and we did try to spend this level of capital. So in the top graph, in the background, you can see the green, that represents revenue. So the light green here is the existing rate revenue with your existing rates. There's a bit of dark green at the bottom, which represents your other revenue, which also doesn't change much. In the bar chart that's superimposed over the background, the dark blue here is your operating expense. The hashed vertical hashes here is your debt service. And then the blue bars here are your capital spending. If you look at these blue bars, this mimics the shape of this chart here with the green. So it's basically the same numbers. And so the way to interpret this graph is any time that your revenue is lower than your expenses, you can see here, you can see the expenses exceeding the revenue in the background, and that's a deficit year. And what we're looking to do is to try to bring revenues up to be able to meet the average spending on an annual basis. The chart down below, the black line represents your target reserves, so the amount of reserves that you should be keeping in the bank, and the red line represents what will actually happen. And you can see you go into negative balance quite quickly with no rate increases. Again, that's just for illustrative purposes. This next slide here shows what the rate increases would have to be in order to cash finance the entire capital program. So I call this the pay-go strategy. So it's a term that we use. Pay as you go is the opposite of debt financing your capital projects. And the dark green here represents the additional rate revenue that you would get. The rate increases are shown down here in the yellow. So it would be a 30% increase right off the bat, then 25%, 25%, 15%. And that would essentially catch you up to get to the point where you can afford to cash finance your entire capital program. There's some other numbers down here that don't apply here, so I'm not going to, I'll cover the debt coverage ratio on the next slide because it becomes more relevant. And you can see that the bottom row here, the debt service, we're not proposing any debt in this scenario, so that's 0. So those are the rate increases that you need to do to follow a pay-go model. The final slide that I'll show you, well, the next slide for the water enterprise is if you were to follow debt finance some of the capital spending. And I'm going to back up here really quickly. In this particular slide, you can see the spikes in the capital spending primarily occur in fiscal 24 and 25. The rest of this capital spending, you should essentially get to the point where you can afford to cash finance this because this is going to happen every year. This is the amount of capital investment that your aging system needs on an annual basis. And it doesn't make sense to debt finance that year after year after year. That just ends up, you're just deferring the cost to future generations. Really the best practice in our industry is to debt finance these spikes in order to get through the years where it's sort of an anomaly. It's more spending than the average, but make sure that you can get to the point where you can cash finance your a year that is a typical capital spending year. So that's exactly what we do here in this strategy here. So this is if we debt finance about $14 million of that capital spending. You can see that these 3 years have drawn down significantly in terms of the cash that you need. Those projects are still being delivered, but they turn into debt service. You can see the debt service increases here rather than being cash financed. And so from a cash standpoint, the blue columns become quite smaller, the debt service gets a little bit larger, and obviously you'll be paying that off over about 20 years. The rate increases are significantly lower in this case, 10% per year for 5 years, followed by 6% per year thereafter. The recommendations we're making for this study really only cover the next 5 years, because trying to predict what the rates need to be beyond that is looking too far out into the future. I mentioned the debt coverage ratio. This is without getting into too many of the details, this is a measure of how easily your utility is able to afford its debt. The minimum level ratio that you need to maintain in order to meet your bond covenants or the requirements of your existing debt is 1.2. You meet that requirement easily in all these scenarios. So this isn't, your debt coverage ratio is not driving your rates. What's driving these rate increases is just trying to keep the target reserve levels, which we show you're doing right here. The red line mimics the black line through the course of the 10 years. So one more topic to throw at you here is the timing of the rate increases. The city has historically done its rate increases at the beginning of the fiscal year, July 1st. This project got started a bit late, and because of the size of these rate increases, we want to make sure that we implement rates as soon as possible. So we're proposing January 1st for the first rate increase. The decision after that point is the city does want to get back on the schedule of raising rates at the beginning of the fiscal year, because administratively it's much easier for the books and for reporting. And that's just the way the city operates. So the question is, would you raise rates again 6 months later, or would you wait 18 months for the next rate increase? And the rates that you've seen so far have all assumed that it will be 6 months later to get back on track. I just wanted to show the impact that would happen if you delayed it for 18 months rather than 6 months. You can see that the fiscal 22 wouldn't have a rate increase, because you'd skip the January 1st and you'd wait until, sorry, you'd skip July 1st and you wait until the next July 1st. So this would be a 0% instead of 10%. And then that next July 1st, this would have to be 23% instead. So you can see that the difference is an additional 3% rate increase as a result of skipping a year of rate increases. So that will be a decision that will need to be made at some point, whether council prefers to have that rate increase after 6 months or after 18 months. And this helps put it into context of how expensive it would be to delay for an additional year. These are pretty significant rate increases. We put together this slide to help explain why that's happened. There's 3 major factors that are driving these rate increases. One is that there's been a lower than expected rebound in water usage. So the last rate study, this is water production in the city historically, and you can see the water usage was increasing quite a bit from 2010 till about 2014. And then we had that major historical drought that everybody remembers from a few years back. And so usage dropped significantly. The last rate study happened right in the height of that drought. And the conventional wisdom at the time, not just from the city, but from across the state, was expecting at least a partial rebound of water usage after the drought subsided. And so at the time, we actually have some graphs that showed that this was the expected rebound of water usage, maybe not back to the historical highs, but at least part of the way back. And what we found is that there's been very little rebound at all. And so that's part of the reason that the rates the rate increases that we need are a bit higher than expected. The second is this increase in focus on addressing aging infrastructure and increasing capital spending. And then the third piece is the increase in the operating budget, which has partially been driven by an increase in the cost allocation plan. So the cost allocation plan is the amount that the general fund draws from the utility. This happened on both the water utility and the sewer utility. The city follows a standard methodology for allocating its overhead costs to the different departments. And there have been some of the metrics that are used for measuring that have increased for the water and the sewer utility, namely showing up more on the city council's agenda and some other metrics that have increased. And so there's been an increase in that transfer out from the utilities to the general fund. So that was a mouthful. I think I might have used almost all my 15 minutes. I haven't done sewer yet. And I do want to mention the water shortage surcharge, but before I go on, I just covered all of water really quickly there. There's a lot of information. I wanted to just pause for a second and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, Gus, did you have any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, that was quite a bit. And, personally, I like the pay-as-you-go approach. I just think it's a little cleaner for everyone. You're looking at, you're saying 2021, we're looking at a 10% increase. What does that equate to on an average water bill? I know that's kind of are we talking $20, $50, $5?
Let me fast forward here. This is one of the final slides, but this addresses your question here. This is a survey of regional utilities, and it shows here that your current rates are about $64 or so combined for your water bill. That's the fixed portion and the usage portion. This assumes about 9 units of water usage. That's sort of a median water user for a single family home with a 1-inch meter. The increase would be on the, sorry, I don't have the exact numbers up here, but you can kind of eyeball that. It's about a $3 increase on a $60 bill.
All right.
Or maybe a bit more. It's about a $5 increase on a $60 bill.
Thank you.
Sure.
But Mark, on just real quick clarification on the 10% increase, that is for the debt strategy. Is that not correct? Or
correct.
And
so I'll scroll back here. The
it out, at least when staff walked through the presentation. I certainly understand your comment about the pay-as-you-go strategy, but it appeared to us, at least as staff, that given the historically low interest rates, that the debt strategy may very well be something we consider to fund needed capital improvements over a definitive period of time. Say for, look at CIP projects for say a 3 or 5 year period. I don't know, Mark, if you want to weigh in on that. I think that's kind of what you were driving at with the debt strategy, is you don't want to do it indefinitely, but you pick a period of time and you list the projects that you want to carry out and finance those.
Yeah, that's right. And you're right that interest rates are at a historical low. They're, below 3% in some cases, which is really remarkable. And this is a change for the city in how it's addressing its infrastructure. It's in the past there, unfortunately the city deferred a lot of spending. And so when you start up, when you change the way that you do business, sometimes it does make sense to absorb some of those costs with some debt. As I mentioned, we would never encourage debt financing excessively to the point where you're paying for normal spending with debt. But these spikes are going to be difficult to get through. And what you can see here on the PAYGO strategy is that you spike the rates up high you're basically increasing all of your rates just to afford these 2 years here, 24, 25. This really, everything's being driven by fiscal 25 here. And then you can see it's 0% rate increases for the next 6 years, but the reserves are still going up. And it's a timing issue, right? You're ramping your rates up in order to be able to afford this spike in capital spending, and you overdo it. Essentially, you overshoot your mark to the point where now your capital spending levels out to what is quote unquote normal, but your reserves are still going up because you had to raise your rates so much just to be able to afford that earlier year. So that's really the idea behind debt financing in this particular situation. Certainly not something that we would propose doing systematically or repeatedly.
And Mark, if I can just add to this discussion, I think for the mayor and Madam Chair, one option or solution that we're looking at to address this, if the recommendation is to continue with PAYGO, but even with it, I think it's required if we do it with PAYGO, but it's even advisable if we look at the debt strategy, is to look at the list of projects that we've identified or that have been identified in our capital improvement program. And maybe Mark, you can kind of slide back to that slide. I know that this really reflects the work that our city engineer has undertaken with our water staff in terms of maintenance projects. And you can see that we start ramping up, next year, but in particular fiscal year 23, 24, and 25. Each of those 3 years, there is a significant number of capital improvement projects. Those can be, and I would suggest it be done strategically, deferred to additional years. There is a likelihood that, given the number of projects in any of those fiscal years, it exceeds our capacity from a staffing perspective to fully carry out. So I think it kind of drives the need for staff to look carefully at these list of projects, prioritize them accordingly, and defer where it's appropriate. Obviously, that needs to be done with caution, because as I think Mark pointed out, Mark Hildebrand, is, over the last 3 years, the city has not undertaken any capital improvement projects in our water enterprise. We've done, like this year we did a maintenance project that was critical in terms of rehabbing a filter system. But we haven't done any major, capital projects. And so what happens obviously over time is you just deferring them out, and they become more and more critical as time goes on. So I just wanted to point that out. I mean, it could be my direction to our staff was to look carefully at that list of projects and determine where it might be appropriate to defer some of those maintenance projects. And I look at it just again through the lens of, what are we capable of carrying out from a staffing perspective? Even if you hire project managers to manage this, it's a tremendous amount of work compacted into really three fiscal years. So that's a work in progress for your staff.
Yeah.
If I could add, this is Bob Reed, and I just wanted to piggyback on what David said, and I think you're right on with your comments there. You know, that now that we have the financial model developed and we're looking at the CIP and we're looking at financing strategies, and we're also cognizant of the rate impacts of the decisions, but we really are looking at, you know, what is the urgency or the real need for the capital projects, and that's done through the CIP process. What is the financial capacity to pay for projects, and what is the staffing capacity to undertake the projects and manage them through the construction process, and all those things come together. And so in some respects, this can be a bit of an iterative process to find what is the right balance between all of those different factors and considerations. And so that's, you know, really the position that we're in now. I would like to emphasize, though, that, you know, spending nothing or close to nothing on the CIP on an annual basis, as you've been doing in the last few years, is not a very good place to be. And you probably need to be up somewhere around 3 million, 3.5 million a year in and year out. And whether it takes you 2 years to ramp up to that, or 5 years to ramp up to that, or something else, you know, is something that can be discussed and considered. But you really need to get to that point where you can have a sustainable, ongoing, pay-as-you-go program it's something on that order of magnitude. And until you get there, you're really in a somewhat of a risky situation, because the infrastructure continues to age, whether you're working on it or not.
Yep. Okay.
Unless there are any other questions from staff or Gus, I just had a comment. Anybody else need to jump in on water? Well, thank you for this section of the presentation. I know that, you know, we're pressed for time today, but it just seems to me that this is just like a gas tax to pay for streets. I mean, the next item on our presentation is an overview of Sonoma Water Partnership, which is, you know, a partnership with them to decrease water use. So the idea, you know, this model used to work. Is that people paid for water and it was enough to pay for infrastructure. And it doesn't work anymore, because we're trying to get more people to use less water. And if our community is ever really going to grow and, you know, live up to our potential as being a job center, being a place where people both, you know, live and work, which is, you know, it's one of our community goals. We have to find ways for new people to use, and people who are already here to use less water. And so, but the you know, the how you process water, it's like it doesn't, those needs don't change, and we have aging infrastructure. So I mean, just the very model of how we set this up, it sets us up to fail. So, and I'm sure, you know, we're not the only city in this boat. It's probably every city in California, but we are basically just set up to fail where maintaining our water infrastructure is concerned, because we're trying to get people to use less, then we get less income, and then we can't maintain the infrastructure that we have. So I guess I agree with the mayor. I prefer the pay-as-you-go model. I think people should have to pay annually, and I think that they want to, because I think that the one thing that taxpayers don't like and ratepayers don't like is unpredictability. You like to be able to predict about what your rate is going to be every year. But with the maintenance schedule that I'm seeing, that's a big uptick in where our rates would be, and then they would go back down. And so, I mean, in our particular case, I think it is in our interest right now to look at a hybrid. Is that ideally the way that we're going to structure our rates is at pay as you go. But because we have so much deferred maintenance that needs to be taken care of, I don't see how we can reasonably, I don't see how we can't borrow for the big projects in order to do some rate smoothing. Because I know there are going to be some objections to that. Plus the very fact that what we have coming in the very near future is that we're going to, the water that we pull from the Russian River, it's going to be monetized. It's not currently monetized. So It's all just sort of adding up. And I think that just kind of fundamentally how our business plan is flawed. Our business plan no longer applies to today's world. And I think that that's the turning point that we're at right now. And we need to start having these conversations with other cities, with people who because this can't go on, and we're not the only city in that position. This business model doesn't work.
Yeah, correct. You are not the only one in this position.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, the aging infrastructure is really part of the reason that the historical model doesn't work. And you see it not just in the water and sewer industry, but you see it roads and bridges. You see, major national articles all the time about how this nation's infrastructure is crumbling because most of the nation was built about 100 or 50 years ago. And all that stuff is failing at the same time. It's all coming to the end of its useful life, and it's really expensive to go under streets to go replace these old pipes. And so it's not unique to your city. It's good that it's being addressed. It's painful, and it doesn't come at a good time, but it unfortunately never does. So we'll continue to work with David and the staff to look at the capital spending and see if we can smooth out some of the spikes, and work with the city's engineering consultants. And we'll be circling back with revised numbers. But I do appreciate the input. Should I push through the rest of the slides now?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm not going to spend any time on this slide, although just to call your attention to this as we wrap up the water topic, you do have a current policy regarding water shortage surcharge. So this is what happens in the event of a drought. You have a policy in place which includes four different stages essentially. As you look at this, it's 5, but your first one is normal conditions. But the state has recently issued guidelines saying that you have to have 6 stages of drought defined for your new planning purposes. And so we're reframing your policy to include the 6 stages as required by the state, with reduction goals that align with their requirements. And basically what this policy does is it says, if there is a drought, how much is our revenue going to decrease? How much is our spending going to increase? How much is our spending going to decrease? Because all these things get affected. The drought's going to increase your cost of conservation, but it's going to decrease your cost of purchasing and treating water. And how are we going to balance that all out to minimize the impact on the utility? So you can see in yellow, there would be an increase in the charge for water usage. These are just draft numbers at this point. We're still working on it. And the other big line item here, which would be a concession by the utility, is here in the multi-pronged corrective strategy, there would be a decrease in capital spending in those years as well. If you're facing a major drought, your priorities need to change, unfortunately, temporarily, away from capital spending and addressing the change in your cost structure. So we will circle back with final numbers at the next meeting. So as we look at the sewer utility, this is essentially the same type of model. All these boxes are very similar to the water. The beginning fund balance for the sewer utility is about $3 million. The revenue, very similar in the sense that it's 86% rate revenue on the sewer side. And the costs, expenses are very similar. The difference here is that sewer does not have any debt service, outstanding debt. So about 42% in salaries, and that 15% out to the general fund. Now, sewer is facing a really interesting challenge way out in the future, and it's an unknown challenge at this point, but the city may eventually be required to put in tertiary water treatment. And that basically means that the level to which its wastewater is treated would need to increase. And this is a state level mandate. It's not clear when or if this mandate will actually be effectuated, but it's called the Advanced Water Treatment Project. It's about $80 million. David, how much was the total for? Or Bob, you're muted, Bob. Sorry, I'm not remembering off the top of my head.
Yeah, it was in that order of magnitude, about $80 million.
Thank you. Yeah, $80 million. And you can see it just absolutely dwarfs all of the other capital spending way out, in about 10 years. The problem with this project is twofold. One, we don't know if it's actually going to be required. Two, we don't know when it's going to be required. And three, the sewer utility has a lot of work to do just to catch up with the increase in capital spending. Again, you can see there's been almost no capital spending over the last 5 years. Just to get up to the modest amount of additional capital spending, you're going to see some pretty material rate increases just to deal with that. So we wanted to make you aware of this potential project out in the future. But for our purposes, what we're proposing is that we just focus on your future without that project, because we don't know how much it is. We don't know how much it's going to cost. And you've got your work cut out for you just to afford the new average capital spending, which will be about $2 million per year, for which, is similar to the increase that you're seeing on the water side. So that's the assumption on capital spending. The detailed list of projects is here on slide 25. There's a similar reserve situation where there's a contingency reserve and a replacement reserve. The replacement reserve is about $2 million. And this is a slide, again, that reiterates the situation with the advanced water treatment project. You would need a 600% rate increase if you were expecting to cash finance that project in 10 years. Or a 325% rate increase if you're expecting to debt finance that project in 10 years. But again, we don't know if it's going to be required, when it's going to be required, what it's going to cost. And so we are proposing to not address this issue at this time for this study. And we're really just going to look at all the other capital spending. So here is the rate situation if you don't raise rates. Again, similar to the water side, not a recommendation, but just provided for context. You can see the reserves dropping down quite quickly. Here is, and in this situation, we are not showing you a debt finance recommendation or scenario. We're just showing you what it would look like to pay go to cash finance. And that's very specifically because of the advanced water treatment project. We don't see it as being in the city's interest to take on debt now when you may be taking on a significant amount of debt in the future to be able to pay for that future project. Plus the capital spending for sewer is pretty steady here. You can see there's those two spikes in 26, 27, but generally it's a relatively consistent amount of new capital spending. So combined with the fact that you want to be able to position yourself to be able to afford that advanced water treatment project if and when it comes, we propose only cash financing your existing obligations at this point. And so you can see that would be a 15%, 15%, 14, 14, 14, 12. And then beyond that, like I said, we're not making recommendations, but you're essentially leveling out to just making rate adjustments for inflation. That's my last slide for sewer. So are there any questions on the sewer side?
Just one, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yep, absolutely. Jump in.
I should know the answer to this, but I don't. Tertiary water treatment is going to be very expensive for the city of Cloverdale, and I'm sure it's going to be an unfunded mandate. But with that being said, is that shared or out of the sewer and the water enterprise funds, or is it just strictly sewer?
It's strictly sewer. However, I have seen models where if you can turn around and treat that water to reclaimed water levels, tertiary doesn't necessarily mean that it's eligible for reuse, but it's pretty darn close. If you can treat it to the point that it becomes reclaimed water and that you can use it as part of a recycle program, then yes, you could use the sales of that water. You could sell that water to the water utility essentially and help to,
Help defer that.
mitigate
Yeah.
some of the costs to the sewer side.
And
Okay.
Mayor Walter, the town of Windsor has a tertiary treatment facility, and they sell their tertiary treated water. Well, I'm sure Bob, you and Mark worked on it, set rates for that tertiary treated water, which they then in turn, collect revenue from. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
they-
and so does Healdsburg. And City of Healdsburg sells it to the wineries, area wineries, and for construction.
If we had a golf course, I guess we'd be all set, huh?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you, Mark.
sure.
No, I think we'd be in worse shape where water is concerned, but I hear you. Well, I guess, Mark, I guess my, just kind of one follow-up question. This is kind of the crystal ball question, is that, these numbers are just ridiculous. Yeah, this is astronomical. So, I mean, when you're talking about cities the size of Cloverdale, I mean, really there has to be, if tertiary treatment were mandated, and we were to see those kinds of expensive, I mean, there would have to be some kind of statewide or or federal assistance for projects of that magnitude. So I just was, do you have any insight on that?
Well, Bob and I have worked with other clients who are facing similar requirements. I don't know the specifics of the mandate for Cloverdale at this point, but it's probably being viewed by the state as an exception that they've made for Cloverdale up until now. The water quality requirements into freshwater bodies is pretty strict throughout the state, but there are some systems that have been in place for long enough that they allow them to continue, and they say, all right, in 10 years, we're going to force you to catch up with the rest of, the state. And that's always an overwhelming prospect because it's such a massive expense. In terms of help, I have not seen forgiveness of in one sense, they feel like they're helping you by deferring the requirement for so long. There are some grants, clean water grants and other grants that are available. I can't say that they would pay for most or all of it. You would more than likely qualify for an SRF loan, which is a state revolving fund loan, which is very low interest rate, on the order of 2%, sometimes lower. But that's not free money. And they also sometimes defer the requirement to repay that loan for a certain number of years. So they do try to help out, but in terms of paying for the project at the state level, I haven't seen that. Bob, have you witnessed any situations where the state stepped in and paid for it?
Yeah, I agree with what you said, that there may be some grant opportunities or partially grant funded, as well as the SRF loan process. They, often have like a 40-year payback rather than a 20 or 30-year payback. So that reduces the annual, debt service obligation. And certainly, particularly if they're, forcing a project of this magnitude on the city, then also providing some financial assistance in accomplishing that, seems you'd be a good candidate for that, since those monies are competitive. I guess the one thought that I have is as Mark has said, this large treatment plant is sort of the elephant in the room, but it's not a reality at this point in time. It's way out, maybe 10 years in the future, unknown scope, unknown cost. Don't know exactly when it might be a requirement. And we are not including that in these financial projections. I think it's important and relevant that you're aware that that's on the horizon, that it may impact the city at some point in the future. But I think you've got, enough to take on in the near term, just to getting to a rehabilitation replacement program with the other needs. And that's what we're focusing on with this financial plan.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the mayor or staff?
I'm good, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay. City manager?
Madam Chair, I don't have any, further questions at this point. I think what we'd like to do is, review with the subcommittee, the schedule going forward for this process and kind of what those next steps look like. And if there's anything between now and bringing this back to council or bringing this to council for review that you'd like us to consider further, that direction would be helpful just to guide us in preparation for bringing this for initial presentation to the city council.
I'm sorry, just one last piece that I think is important. I did show the survey for the water, and it shows that you're sort of middle of the pack currently, and that the 10% rate increase would take you towards the top of the pack. On the sewer side, it's important to note that you're currently by far and away the lowest sewer rate in the region. And even with that, I believe it was a 15% rate increase in the first year, you're still far and away the cheapest rate in the region. It would take 2 or 3 of those rate increases before you even entered into the middle of the pack. And so from a combined standpoint, you can see that your combined bill is the lowest in the region, and the rate increases after 1 year between water and sewer would put you sort of lower middle pack there. So just for context, I think it's important to see that the percentages look daunting, but particularly on the sewer side, a high percentage of a small number is still a pretty small number. So I just wanted to provide that context. Now, David, here's the schedule that we've discussed. I'll let you go ahead and talk through that if you'd like.
Sure. So, one of the conversations with Mark and Bob and the city staff team was, bringing this forward prior to as much as possible prior to the elections, because it's thought that if we didn't, we'd be in a position to bring forward, rate adjustments, possibly with a different mix of council members that might make it very challenging, after having gone through this with this council. So, really there are 2 things we're asking for council, for the subcommittee to weigh in on. We've heard your feedback on the pay-go and the debt strategy, and kind of heard, a preference for pay-as-you-go, but maybe, look carefully at the debt strategy and, more clearly define what that looks like in terms of rates. And then the second item is timing. Timing, there's 2 aspects to it. It's when do you want the rates to be effective, and what's that rate change process going forward, and whether this schedule is something that council or that the subcommittee could support us in terms of bringing this rate study forward to council. So the idea would be bring forward this kind of initial presentation at the council meeting, the second meeting in August, followed with a revised update on September 9th, which would be basically your following meeting, in the first meeting in September, at which time you would schedule, because this rates requires a Prop 218 notice, and I believe it's 45-day notice, if I'm correct. So the soonest we'd be able to bring it forward under this schedule would be November 11th for formal approval by the city council. And then what we've identified is that they would become effective January 1st, with the second increase starting July 1. Again, remembering that if we move to an annual schedule, that the rate increase ends up being more significantly higher. And so the thought was to get back on a fiscal year basis. But that's really a policy decision of council, and certainly the subcommittee can weigh in if you think that's an appropriate strategy for implementation of an updated rate schedule.
Gus, do you want to weigh in?
Well, I'm fine with the projected schedule the way it is. And you know, David, I'm sure you and I know I'll have a couple conversations with you about the pay-as-you-go or the financing, but because quite frankly, there's a couple things on the capital improvement project that I don't see listed unless I'm missing them. One of them is the well that we're planning to put in on the east side of the river. Second, you know, I always think we need more storage. So, but we can have that conversation, I think, one-on-one.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Gus, that, you know, what the council has not had the opportunity to review is the proposed capital improvement program. The staff has been working on that for a fair amount of time now. And I know it's underwent considerable review by our staff, but the goal is to get that to council as well, you know, so that council can weigh in on projects you know, that we think are priority projects for our enterprises.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this really, it also impacts a lot of possibly our development plans and our development guidelines, because we need to be very realistic about doing everything that we can to figure out, yeah, what are the development guidelines that are going to be in our best interest where our water and sewer rates are concerned. So that might be something that you know, a bigger picture item that we need to talk about. So but it sounds like you have the direction that you need, and I guess unless there's anything else, we probably want to move on to looking at how we can save water and have less income for our water department. So with that, I'll say thank you to Mark and Bob, and I think David, I think we're back to you to give us the introduction on that, on item C.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
well, I just want to say thanks to Mark and Bob for their presentation today to the subcommittee. We have a meeting scheduled, I think it's tomorrow, or Thursday, Mark, and we're gonna review the feedback that was offered or by you, Madam Chair and Mayor, and we'll plan for the presentation to council on August 26th. So.
Great, thank you very much for the presentation. We do appreciate, even it was tough news to take, but we needed it. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that we'll move on to.
My apologies. I just wanted to just let you know that there are no hands raised at this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Irene. Apologies for public comment. And I'm sure we'll be getting plenty in the future on this item in future meetings.
Hey, Mark and Bob, Mark, if you're able to stick around just for the next discussion item, it shouldn't be too long. And Irene, if Paul Piazza is available, if we can add him to the group of panelists. So the next item is an overview of the Sonoma Water Partnership MOU. This MOU was established to support membership in the Water Partnership as part of the Sonoma County Water Agency. The staff, following the discussion by council that we may have to declare a water emergency, which we're currently largely managing through our operational practices, did have a meeting with Sonoma Water on what it would involve in terms of becoming a member of the partnership. And what was provided by Sonoma Water was a draft copy of their MOU. And we really looked at the city of Healdsburg as kind of a model that could be followed by the city of Cloverdale, because they just within about the last year became a member of the partnership. And so Paul Piazza was able to walk us through what it would entail to become a member. It's a little complicated in terms of how the fee structure works. But in terms of round numbers, the annual fee for the partnership is about $20,000. Obviously, that would be something that we would need to factor into the rate study under operational expenses. Some of that fee could be offset by reduction in the cost of our participation or membership with the Russian River Watershed Users Association, because part of the fee that we pay to them actually gets paid to Sonoma Water to provide water education. So there's an offset that would occur. So there's some savings there. The ancillary requirement in the MOU to the membership fee is that the city also budgets what was referred to, I think, in the MOU is a match of 175% of the membership fee. So if it was 20,000, we're talking roughly 35,000 that you dedicate towards water conservation programs and projects. So you could, for instance, if you use that number, it's about 35,000 annually, would be funds that we put in operational budget to fund water conservation programs such as water rebates for new fixtures, cash for grass, the toilet rebate type programs, and then obviously some educational programs. But that's kind of a big picture overview. And Irene, was Paul able to join us? I'm not sure if he's on the call.
Hi, David. Yeah, I'm present. I've just been hiding out in the background.
Oh, okay. Well, Paul, let me introduce you to Council Member, Madam Chair, Melanie Bagby, and our Mayor, Gus Walter. They're both on the line. And again, this is just an opportunity to provide a kind of a brief overview of the Sonoma Water Partnership MOU.
Thank you, David, Madam Chair, and Mayor Walter. Thank you for allowing me to come to your subcommittee meeting today. We are excited to hear of the interest potentially of joining the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership. And David did give a good introduction to some of the costs associated with being partners in round numbers. I would say that some of the other benefits to joining the partnership financially include your recent threshold as an urban water supplier and the requirement per DWR and the Urban Water Management Planning Act to submit an annual water loss balance to DWR on an annual basis. And you probably had to pay some consulting fees for the third-party validation requirements for that. And that is included in joining the partnership. We have a certified water loss validator on staff, and we do provide those services to our partners. So that would be an additional roughly $2,500 to $3,000 that you're currently having to pay that you wouldn't have with the partnership. That would be an additional savings to you. Some of the other program advantages that are somewhat lesser known, because the partnership does fund a lot of regional programs that cross boundaries between water and energy. So the Sonoma County Green Business Program is actually an offering throughout the region that is funded through Sonoma Water. Actually, Jane Elias, I believe, who's the division manager at the County Sustainability and Energy Division, is a Cloverdale resident. Jane and I work closely together to offer those programs to businesses throughout the county. I did provide a synopsis of all of the partnership benefits to your staff, but I'll run through just a couple of the highlights. David mentioned the water education program that's provided through Sonoma Water. That also includes energy efficiency outreach as part of a partnership with Sonoma Clean Power that our staff provides as well. We do require, as a member of the partnership, that you join the California Water Efficiency Partnership. There is a small annual fee associated with that. CalWEP, as it's referred to, is the agency that assumed the function of the California Urban Water Conservation Council when that agency disbanded a couple of years back. And CalWEP is also currently a statewide chapter of the National Alliance for Water Efficiency. And so one of the benefits in the partnership is you have all of the legislative tracking and advocacy pieces being provided at both the federal and state levels, and updates provided to your staff through the partnership. We do an annual summer outreach campaign in both Sonoma and Marin counties. It's a multimedia campaign that includes broadcast radio, a variety of digital placements that include video and audio placements, as well as still ads. Interestingly, we still do a print campaign for a few of the local trusted news outlets, but by and large, that outreach is all focused on digital placements now. We have a quarterly newsletter that goes out highlighting programs and events of all of our partners. We do a variety of public education and outreach events around Sonoma County Fair and other tabling and in-home programs. Of course, some of those are currently on hold due to the shelter-in-place order, but our staff is quickly working on solutions to be offered. A lot of our programming is virtually as well. You're, I'm sure, familiar with the Sonoma County Master Gardeners. They have a Garden Sense program that is funded through Sonoma Water, and they have a subset of their total 300 or so Master Gardeners that participate as consultants for free in-home advice to residents that are interested in learning to save water in their gardens, or interested potentially in reducing or removing the amount of turf grass at their house to install low water use landscape. So that service is included as well. We have annual tours. The Sonoma Marin Eco-Friendly Garden Tour is a popular event. We transitioned that event to virtual this spring, and that was a great success. We provided videos to all of those participants in that tour. We had probably close to 8,000 unique views to that event that year, which is a good turnout. Anyway, without going into too much detail, there's a lot of benefit. I know in talking to Ryan Pedrati, who is the manager of Sonoma Water's education program, he was very excited engaging with your schools locally. There's, as David said, some cost savings associated with our having you in the partnership, and that your membership to RRWA currently has a pass-through of around $10,000 to Sonoma Water to provide the stormwater education locally. So essentially, for just a few $1,000s more for the water education piece, they'll be doing all of the education for schools, which includes free materials, maps, pencils, and et cetera for all of the Cloverdale students. We provide free busing to take the kids on the field trips down to the science education labs down near Wohler Bridge. So those class field trips are included as well for free. There's a program to allow access to internships and job shadow programs for high school students, and a slew of others. And then uniquely, we also, Sonoma Water owns a property just to the west of Cloverdale, up near Lake Sonoma, that already has the beginnings of a water education facility. And I know Ryan was excited about the potential for building that facility out a little bit further for use by Cloverdale students. So we have a lot to offer. It was an interesting position to follow up on the rate study. We're in unique times, and as it applies to water. And although I'm not going to go into the detail today, there are a lot of benefits to water conservation and regarding costs, and not all of them are related to just the erosion of rate revenue. So with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions you might have.
Mr. Mayor, did you want to start us off?
Well, thank you. And I'm not going to get on my usual soapbox, But I'm just kind of curious about the property to the west that you said that you currently owned. Where is that?
You can access the property from Rockpile Road. So if you go up to the lake and across the bridge, probably another mile or two up the road to the east side of Rockpile, there's a large property up there that was dedicated by the Federal Lands Program to Sonoma Water for recreation and for the use for our programs.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks. So could you talk a little bit about the educational programs that have had to be curtailed because of COVID-19 and what your plans are for doing education if for next year if the stay-at-home order stays in effect?
Yeah, and I would defer any of the detailed questions to Ryan Pedrati as it applies to the education program. So I'm happy to provide a response from Ryan.
Yeah, maybe you could talk about what rollbacks, or what difference in the rates would be if those programs can't move forward.
Yeah, I'm happy to go back to Ryan to discuss how they're continuing to provide their education programs in the current shelter environment for schools. Would have to come back to you for that.
Okay.
I can speak to the outreach programs that we are creating solutions for. So as an example, a lot of our direct outreach to customers is happening in homes. And of course, we've had to curtail those programs. So our Water Smart Home program, where we do in-house water assessments, we've quickly transitioned to a tool that allows residents to conduct a very brief self-assessment. We just provide step-by-step guidance with photos for them to submit that report to us online by self-assessing, and then we follow up with a detailed report that provides information about programs available that might be able to help offset the cost for some of the fixture upgrades that they might be interested in pursuing, or landscape upgrades, as it were, and also just to detail the potential savings that they could achieve by upgrading or changing some of those behaviors in their home. In regard to the outdoor portion of that program, we're still continuing to offer that to the extent that a customer is open to our coming out for a visit and a controller is located on a property in a location where we can appropriately distance. Our staff does go out and do those site assessments for landscape continuously. So we've already done a couple this week, and that's the case for most of our partners as well.
I guess this is a question for staff, is that, we already know that our Russian River Watershed Association membership ticks off, many of our state requirements, and saves us money in the long run. So, what kind of cost savings can we expect, or if we were to, move forward with this?
Madam Chair, if I can, based on my conversations with Mr. Piazza, at least on the water education piece, it sounds like it would be a direct reduction in costs from what we currently fund Russian River Water Users Association for the water education component to this program. So it's just, we're basically reducing costs there to transfer to Sonoma Water, because they're the end provider of that service. So that kind of my sense is that the cost reduction is kind of one for one. We're transferring, we're just basically paying Sonoma Water directly rather than through the Russian River Watershed Users Association for that component. And then the other half of the fee, the $20,000, I think goes to pay for the water conservation outreach and campaign and technical support that Sonoma Water staff would be able to offer our city residents.
So that it's not taking care of any additional mandates or requirements. We would be paying this out of pocket for additional services that we don't have now.
Yeah, well, I think with that assumes if we're not in a drought, because I think, you know, one of the things that staff started to begin looking at as part of declaring a stage 1 water emergency is what are the additional costs we're going to incur for the water education requirements along with making that declaration. And
that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, right.
There we go.
Right, and I mean, I think that's why this is timely to bring this forward, is because we would have some direct costs, particularly if the drought continues. We will find ourselves bringing to council budget amendments to fund outreach materials to our community about drought reduction, water reduction measures. And so
these are things we would be mandated to do if indeed the drought goes on, correct?
Absolutely, it will be.
Okay, so I think that's what's missing in the staff report right now, and I think that's what should be in the council report, is that if indeed we move forward with the declaration, this is what we'll be required to do. This is roughly how much it would cost us if we did it by ourselves. This is how much it will cost us if we go through Sonoma Water for those same, those checking off those same check boxes that are going to be mandated. So I would encourage you. Otherwise, I don't think the council is necessarily going to understand why they're looking at this. That's really, it needs to be made clear when we're presenting this to the entire council.
I certainly understand that comment. It's an important point to make, Madam Chair, and I think you're absolutely right that really kind of understand the return on investment associated with being a partner in the MOU. It would be critical to highlight. And then the other component to the 175 match towards water conservation, that's something that it's probably prudent that we do anyways, as a good management tool to be able to provide the direct water conservation opportunities for our residents in our business community.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, we need to move forward. Otherwise, it just they're all good programs. They're all good things to do, but it's not really clear what the why is. So I think, yeah, if we going forward, that's what we're going to need to see. We're going to need to see the cost savings. I mean, so I guess, and then just to sort of wrap up to make sure I understand this. So we're already paying for the educational component that Sonoma Water does around water education and energy education in schools. We're already paying for that through Russian River Watershed Association. And we would just take that portion and pay it directly to Sonoma Water instead of doing the pass through that we're currently doing. Is that correct?
Paul, can you weigh in on that? I know you understand the structure of that funding, and I know I don't think we have Eric or I don't know if Mark's still present. If he was able to.
Madam Chair, yeah, I'm a former technical working group member of our RWA, so I'm very familiar with the work plan. There is a benefit program in the work plan to provide stormwater education for the city of Cloverdale. It's actually a little over 11,000, I believe, in this current work plan. But essentially, that is just a pass-through to Sonoma Water for our water ed staff to provide stormwater outreach and education to Cloverdale. So for the roughly 20,000 that David mentioned, about half of that is for the complete package of water education to Cloverdale. So, it's actually just slightly higher than that. Ryan estimated it would be roughly 12 to 14 for him to provide his full water education package to Cloverdale. You're already paying that 10, so that 10 essentially would be just going directly to us instead of using our RWA as the pass-through. And for an additional $1,000 or $2, you'd get the entire complete water side of it as well, including the energy efficiency outreach that's part of the SCP program that we also offer.
Okay. Yeah, I think that needs to be made clear when you're doing your staff report, David. Yeah, because it's a little murky right now. I think I've got it.
It is, Madam Chair. It's pretty complex because there's a lot of different parts to.
It's not really that complex. We just need it very clearly. It just needs to be on a slide very clearly. I recommend a pie chart, and it'll make sense.
Right.
Okay. There. All right. That's great. Thank you. That's very helpful. So, do you have the direction? I mean, I'm definitely open to it. I don't know how Gus feels about it. I think it needs to be presented to council with, you know, all of our presentation bells and whistles so that we understand what we're making a decision about.
Absolutely understand, and I am partly to blame why we're not doing a formal presentation today, because we had two big presentations, and I just wanted to make sure that we were at least sharing this initial interest, because we're also working on the rate study and make sure
Exactly.
you know it in so much as there's some impact on rates.
It was not criticism, it was feedback. I completely understand. So Gus, did you have anything else on this?
I'm good with it. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Chair.
There you go. So let's move this on to the entire council with a little bit more complete package, and then let's move this along because we got a planning commission meeting that you're also up against. So
thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it.
Welcome. Look forward to a future presentation.
Great. So with that, I think we'll move on to item D. Who's taking this?
Madam Chair, I can start. So this is the item letter of introduction to St. Joseph Community Recovery and Resilience Initiative. This came to our attention late last week through Rebecca Enos and her work with the health action, and also with her work with in the field of wellness, that St. Joseph's was requesting a letter of intent from organizations that would foster and support community recovery and resilience within their community. And I think, Madam Chair, you, Melanie Hall, and Kevin met at the senior center, I think, or had a virtual meeting last week to
and Amanda.
And Amanda.
Yeah.
To discuss a concept of putting together a letter of introduction to establish a community organization consisting of the city, the senior center, health action chapter, as well as other local nonprofits, including the Chamber of Commerce, to support a community program to bring our nonprofits together around kind of resiliency and ensuring, the food for our community and wellness. And we were able to submit a letter of introduction via their online portal. And I understand that Kevin and possibly you, Madam Chair, attended a webinar today from St. Joseph's. I was not a participant in that, but that we'd be waiting to hear back from them about development of a formal proposal to build upon the kind of letter of intent, which was a very concise document with very tight word counts. So it didn't give you much opportunity to expand upon kind of what the vision is, and probably something that could, if we're formally invited, be able to more broadly develop a proposal and a concept that could obtain grant funding through St. Joseph to help implement in Cloverdale.
That about sizes it up. Actually, could we maybe bring, Irene, could we bring Amanda and Melanie Hall into the panelists group so they can pipe up if they have anything to add? I mean, essentially, I wanted to have this on the agenda because it was part of the letter of interest that we submitted. that this would be the body that would be responsible for kind of monitoring the progress. So I just wanted to make sure that the mayor was brought up to speed, staff was brought up to speed, and essentially we've submitted the letter of interest for grant funding for increasing for building capacity amongst for community outreach at the senior center and health action amidst COVID and post COVID. And we're just in the very early stages of finding out if we will qualify for some grant funding. So I don't know if Melanie Hall or Amanda wanted to pipe in with some additional information.
I would say at this time that pretty much summarizes what we're our efforts are towards, and fingers crossed, because it was such a, as David said, concise letter. We have to wait and see back if there's interest. I'm hoping that they'll just at least have some more conversation with us around what our vision might be for Cloverdale community, forming this resiliency group.
And then I was on the webinar, I think Kevin was maybe earlier today, and it was interesting. It was a completely different world than what I usually deal with. But the one thing I understood was that they're as buzzwordy as any IT people I've ever seen. That industry, that quasi-governmental nonprofit area, they are buzzword compliant. That's for sure. And so one of the things that I did gather is that, I mean, part of why they were having the outreach and the letters of interest is that they wanted to gather information as much as give information about possible funding for capacity building, and encouraged us, hey, if you're not in this initial round, then maybe you'll be eligible. Maybe we'll have a conversation and you'll be eligible for something in the future. So they really wanted to use it as an opportunity to do outreach with maybe groups that they haven't heard from before and don't know about, groups who are working together to solve problems that they didn't necessarily know about. So, for them, it was, it's not like they weren't using us for our information, but they wanted to at least have an understanding of what the needs are and, what is being formed in response to current conditions, including COVID-19. So I know Becky was on the call as well. Did you have anything to add? That's your world, you speak their language. Maybe you understood what was happening better.
No, I think you assessed it pretty well. That is, at that large of a level with an organization like St. Joseph's in Providence, yes, buzzworthy is all the thing. Oh, and acronyms.
Yeah.
They're super happy about acronyms.
They're worse than us. I was shocked.
No,
yeah.
That's huge. I think the one thing that I would just like to add, and I realize I'm going on record at this point, but I did go ahead and submit another LOI for health action. So just in case it was sort of a plan B, because of the timeline and David's experience in the portal closing at 8, which it indeed did when the whole time it said noon.
It said noon.
Yeah, it did. And so I went back to St. Joe's and they did say, oh, sorry, yes, we did mean noon. So they reopened it back up. With David's credentials, I was unable to see the application. However, just as like I said, as a plan B, I wrote to Health Action in general. So the idea that I had was I will write on behalf of Health Action County. And because Cloverdale is pursuing the self-healing communities model as a framework for recovery and resilience, that then whatever should we be asked to apply fully, and then should that grant be fully funded, then Cloverdale would receive a larger chunk than the rest of the health action because I wrote it from behalf of our perspective. So I think it was partly to educate Providence that Health Action is a county initiative, but there are local chapters, and that this is what one chapter is doing specifically underneath that umbrella.
Oh, thank you, Becky. Hopefully, we'll see.
So
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, do we have I wasn't able to attend today, the meeting, but did they give a date on when they will get back to people, groups?
No, it was really information gathering for them, which I think is fine. You know, it's kind of their first stages of they're pivoting their work. That was part of the presentation, is talking about, well, you know, we're associated with healthcare, but healthcare or health and well-being is more than healthcare. It's housing, it's discharge planning, it's racial equity, it's social equity, it's all of these things. And so that was kind of their little coming out party to say, hey, people in the communities who are working on these things that maybe aren't our core capacities, we may have funding for you, because we're finding out that, yeah, that our board has set the direction that healthcare is not enough. So we'll see what happens in the future. I just wanted to make sure that we were transparent and open and let everybody know that, you know, we're going to pursue this, and hopefully there will be, you know, some funding for it. But of course, you know, subsequently, I know David had also mentioned that around capacity building, there may also be some CARES Act funding coming to cities, because it's the same idea, is that, and it kind of ties in with the OpenGov presentation that we were having earlier today, is that we are kind of being thrust in this new era where we don't necessarily have the infrastructure capacity, the technology that we need to continue outreach, whether you're a government or you're a nonprofit. We need the tools to do that. And we can't just say, oh, that would be nice in a year or two. We need it. We need it now.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was it. I don't think there's a lot more than that. It's just one item, one small item. Does anybody else have any other, you know, questions? And so I think we'll leave it possibly as a standing item, and we'll just be monitoring it. And if it goes somewhere, great. And if it doesn't, if we don't get funding, that's fine. But if we get on their radar, maybe we'll be able to get some funding in the future to work together on this. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Madam Chair, if I just have 1 minute, related and pivoting off of that just slightly. Amanda and I will be on a webinar next week for the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, where they are doing a call for applications around communities of change. And so these are actual municipalities that have received funding, again, in collaboration with other nonprofits, agencies, etc. And that dollar amount is $25,000. So we were going to be reviewing that as a health action committee, and about the viability of applying for that. And that also, there was one more thing. And then just also wanted to share in terms of self-healing communities and provide you with a quick update. And then I have to get off the call, unfortunately. Laura Porter, we're still working on dates, as I had promised back in July, trying to nail her down and how to work with municipalities to collect community data during a time of shelter in place. But in the meantime, would just like to offer up to the committee St. Joseph's, our local St. Joseph's, not the large one that likes acronyms. They are willing to work with us to have a screening of the movie Resilience, which Health Action did do last year. I believe it was last spring, and we had a fairly good turnout at the theater at the Clover. But in this case, it would be mostly for city staff and city council. So we would be willing to offer that, which would give great backstory and a lot of good general solid foundation into, you know, where self-healing communities model is coming out of.
And would we be able to stream that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
We streamed it with St. Joseph's Health. We did it for the Sonoma County Mental Health Board a couple months ago, so we could definitely stream it.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, we'll let you get back to what you're doing, and I'll talk to David about getting that on our schedule. Great. All right. Thanks, Becky.
Thank you.
I think that's it for that item. It's very short and sweet. Just wanted to make sure everybody's aware of it. Any questions or concerns? Because if not, we will move on to the next item. Item E. I guess, David, I think you're up. Item E, ad valorem tax rate.
Madam Chair, Mayor Walter, I'll do an introduction, and I'll turn it over to Susie Holmes, Finance Director Susie Holmes, to just walk you through real quick the methodology, if you're so inclined. But the item in your packet is the ad valorem tax rate. This is a tax rate that council sets by resolution annually that gets submitted to the county assessor for inclusion on the property tax bills as a specific rate per $1,000 that is was originally instituted in, I think it was 1971, that helps fund the expenses associated with pension costs for city staff, not including any after added benefits, which are funded by staff through payroll deductions. This is, we're one of, I think, 22 cities in California that have an ad valorem tax that enables us to cover pension costs, through this mechanism. So it's a relatively rare rate that was approved by the voters. And what Susie did is prepare a worksheet, which is included in your packet, based on the anticipated assessed valuation for next year. And what it identifies is that the tax rate would be set at the same rate as it has been, I think now for, it might be I think this is the fourth year, I believe, at 10.7%. And this, unfortunately, what we have not been provided is a copy of the assessment roll, so we know the actual AV for the city, so we can be very specific in terms of dialing in the rate. We're assuming that AV will grow from anywhere from approximately 1% to about 4%, but we don't have the numbers yet because it hasn't been provided to us. So we took a conservative approach at setting the rate consistent with last year. We understand that increasing it in this particular economic environment, every dollar matters, and that could certainly impact residents. And likewise, if we reduce the rate, and it could potentially underfund our reserve balance, which then means increasing rates greater next year. So if the rate is conservative and it could be a little bit higher, the effect is that we will collect a little bit more revenue this year that would then in turn offset potential increases next year. So I kind of think the message is that the approach to calculation of the ad valorem rate was done on a very conservative basis with the taxpayer in mind, and with the subcommittee support, we would bring this forward for your approval at the next council meeting. But Susie is here, and she can walk you through the methodology, which is fairly self-explanatory, but she's happy to walk through the calculation with you if you'd like. And Susie, feel free to chime in anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is that we've heard everywhere that rates might go up 1% to 4%. If we took the 1%, that would be a $20,000 additional revenue that would then be placed into the reserves, which we have been historically using for rate stabilization. But we also use that cash during the period before we actually receive the funds from the county, because we typically receive them late December, early January, and yet we're paying the retirement at, every 2 weeks. So I just wanted to point that out as well. Typically, we have been increasing it a little bit each year to keep the rate stable and to increase our rate stabilization fund. this year, we would not be increasing it if there is no increase in the rates.
Mayor, I hate to put you on the spot, but did you have any questions?
You're not waking me up. I'm already awake. Thank you.
Oh, I know, but I bet this is a tough subject, and I'm torn between I'm torn between walking into the propeller first or pushing you in front of me. So.
Well, let me jump in there. Susie, Susie, I just sent you a personal chat, but I wanted to know the once again the total unfunded liabilities that the city sits at right now, and then secondly, I kind of say this every year. I just want to make sure that we're capturing everything we can capture from an expense standpoint. So that was it, Madam Mayor. Just those two things. Thank you.
So the total unfunded liability is approximately $9 million. That's between all of the funds. We are on a 20, I think we're 20 on the 25th. We're 5 years into a 30-year smoothing process to pay that off. We do make annual payments, one large annual payment towards our unfunded liability annually.
And to add to Susie's comment, one of the changes that council had previously given us direction to do, as Susie indicated, was to make the payment annually rather than as you go. And what that enables us to do is they give us a savings by paying it up front, and that obviously helps our payers and taxpayers by making that payment in advance.
Right, we save the interest that we would normally pay throughout the year.
Well, I think it's important that we make sure that that unfunded number is sitting out there for council to see when they get this report, and also how we're making that payment. So
exactly.
That's it. That's
well,
it,
and that you're really adopting really very sound fiscal policy, like making changing how we make the payments. So because that as we see from that $9 million number, it money adds up really quickly.
Yeah.
So we're really doing the best we can. I mean, this is the same issue that or it's a similar problem that we're dealing with on Sonoma Clean Power with the rising PCIA costs as well, until Diablo Canyon is finally decommissioned in 5 years. We have this really big, completely unrelated to COVID-19, completely unrelated to, the recession that we're experiencing. It's a financial summit that, we have to make these commitments. We legally have to make these commitments, but we also want to, make sure that we're helping the ratepayers as much as we can. We're just being as responsible as we possibly can. But this is just a problem, just like water treatment plant aging infrastructure, sewer treatment plant aging infrastructure. These are problems that you can't ignore.
Right.
So, I appreciate that you're approaching them in the most thoughtful, efficient way possible. And that's why it's like, that's my only comment, is that I can't wish this problem away. We have to face this, and you're doing it in what I think is the most sound way possible. So I'm for moving this ahead and sending it to the council. But you're right, Gus. They need to see that $9 million number to know why we're doing and understand why we're doing what we're doing. Did you have anything else to add, or are there any other comments from staff?
I don't have anything else to add unless someone else has questions.
Okay. Are there any
hands? I'm good.
Okay. Thanks, Gus. All right. With that, I think we'll move on to the expense policy. item F, but I had sent an email to Irene and city manager. The mayor and I talked, and we wanted to have this be part of a larger conversation about the council member handbook and policies, ethos, create all of that. But I see it didn't get changed in for today's agenda.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to just kind of make the suggestion based on the time factors here. We're coming up on 4 o'clock that maybe we can table this item, rephrase it, and get it on the next agenda.
I can support that. Any objection? It's been
No.
so fun today. Or don't you want to talk about expenses?
Madam Chair, and we're happy to change it. We tried to just keep it general, so that it was all encompassing, because there was kind of a lot in terms of, I think, the discussion points. Ultimately, I think staff does need to bring forward a updated travel and training policy. But again, we can talk about that later. It's not urgent by any means.
If I could make a suggestion, can we go ahead and just move that to standing items, and we just take one issue at a time, being on the current items for discussion? Does that sound good? Going forward? And that work? Okay, and so we'll move, and we'll just table item F until a future meeting. Are there any comments, Irene, or anybody with a hand raised? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item G, update on Sonoma County COVID-19 education and compliance.
Okay, staff wanted to provide an update on the county's efforts to establish a compliance program. They are actually bringing to the board tomorrow, Thursday, an ordinance to implement a compliance program. As it's currently written, the compliance program would include fines, citations, administrative citations for private individuals as well as for businesses. The administrative citation amount is, I think it's $100 for first violation, and then ratchets up from there for private individuals. And then for businesses, I believe it's $500, and then it ratchets up from there. It will be up to the city to decide how we want to implement that administrative ordinance. One of the functions that the ordinance is going to do is establish a hotline for all county residents. And then that hotline, the calls that are taken will be directed back to the city of origin. So staff is currently working on how we will respond to those hotline calls. It's been asked for us to designate a staff member within the city to do so. The chief and I have been talking along with Kevin Thompson, and I think from an individual citation perspective, the police department's probably most prepared to be able to handle the individual citations. So for example, for resident calls, because the neighbors are having a large party, it'd be the police department that would respond. Whereas if it was maybe a business matter, it may be looked at more as an economic development issue. And, Kevin and the chamber might collaborate on how to address that. Again, thinking through the lens of kind of starting with compassionate compliance, education, and then, using the enforcement tools as they're provided through the ordinance, should businesses or individuals want to otherwise be scofflaws and not use appropriate, not employ some of the requirements in the enforcement in the health order. So just want to make sure we were giving the subcommittee timely updates. Obviously, there's a lot being worked on in terms of how this is going to ultimately roll out and be enforced by each of the respective jurisdictions.
Any questions? Gus, did you have anything?
Nothing, thank you.
Chief, anything you want to say or don't want to say? Okay, I'll take that as he's not going to say anything.
No,
Okay.
David covered it. David covered pretty much everything. So we'll just have to see when it starts moving along. There are some issues that I have with it, and how the end result of this is going to look. You know, if we use a county's ordinance on our citations, what that's going to look like and how we're going to proceed with that. But the hotline will be interesting. I think that'll keep us busy.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to take the advice from Jose, which was an excellent idea, and kind of really create a flow chart on how to handle this, where it's going to go once the calls come in, where we delegate, and how it's going to end up.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and just make it public so everybody understands. So, and we'll know more Thursday, because I know that they're already lining up to get on to that meeting.
Yeah. So that's really all I wanted to add to that.
All right, thank you, and thanks for being a good sport as usual. Are there any comments or hands raised, Irene? Great. Okay, well, with that, then we will move on to standing items and community outreach efforts from My Brother's Keeper. Do we have an update?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. You know, at the previous July 7th subcommittee meeting, Chief Ferguson gave an overview, I think a very detailed, in-depth overview of the police department budget, followed by a review of use of force policies. And the subcommittee recommended that staff pursue arranging for the community outreach meeting or listening session with the community. And initially, staff's approach was to look at bringing in a facilitator that would help guide a workshop. I think after further discussion and after seeing what some of our neighboring cities have done, where they've done it just more through staff and really just conducting that workshop with existing staff and not bringing in a facilitator, that we thought we could follow a similar approach, assuming the subcommittee's okay with that. In terms of next steps, what that would mean would be developing an agenda and setting a meeting workshop time and date, and getting kind of a virtual workshop on the calendar for folks to be able to sign up or just participate in, and give Chief an opportunity to really highlight the community policing and his role with respect to his officers, and the use of force policies, and what some of the modifications that were made. So if the subcommittee is okay with that, that's the approach we will utilize, and we'll try to figure out a time frame to get a workshop on the calendar.
Mr. Mayor, did you have a comment or?
Sounds good. Just sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds like a plan.
Yep.
Great. All right. Any other comments or hands raised? No.
No hands are raised, Chair.
All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item B, discuss initial steps for reopening and recovery.
Okay, well, what I would really like to take the opportunity to share with the subcommittee is our efforts to begin preparing for fire season, which is upon us, and given that we're also in and managing through an emergency related to COVID, what that looks like. And what we are working on doing right now is reestablishing the Cloverdale Resiliency Initiative, and doing a lot of preparatory work with our the Citrus Fair partners at the Citrus Fair, and establishing them as a formal care and shelter branch of our EOC. So we've begun discussions about a development of a memorandum of understanding with the Citrus Fair to formally serve as our care and shelter branch. We sent correspondence to the county as well, because the county relies heavily on the Citrus Fair as well for sheltering in the northern part of Sonoma County. And so, it could very well be an opportunity for them to be a part of that MOU. one of the goals, I think, was, again, to formalize their role in the EOC. I think it's vital that they have a representative participate directly within the EOC. I think that was a lesson learned during the Kincaid fire, that is so critical that they're there, in being able to report back, but also to report up their resource needs that are so critical to addressing the emergency at hand. And what we want to try to do is the chief started out just with an announcement that we want to pre-position a number of resources at the Citrus Fair, and, in preparation for fire season, given that we are operating and managing through COVID. And likewise, the county, I was on both the chief and I were on a webinar today with County Department of Emergency Management about establishment of, they call them TEPs, and Chief, remind me what that acronym stands for. It's intended to enable folks to come to a shelter, kind of shelter in place in their vehicle in parking areas, in a way to physically distance, but also to have a place to go, because it's, it may be temporary and may need to move if there's a further evacuation, but also to do it in a way that's safe, but where there are resources present. And that's, again, that's a work in process. And so that's all as part. I know this item is about reopening and recovery, but it's also about preparing for the fire season that's upon us in light of COVID, and how we are going to address that should we experience another natural emergency or natural disaster in this environment. So that's again a broad overview. Chief, anything you want to add?
Just tell you that it stands for temporary evacuation point. And there's going to be multiple ones around the county that people are going to go to first. And all the prerequisites are going to be in play before they actually move to a shelter. So that's what the idea behind these are. A lot of resource needs. It's quite complex.
Right. And so we're kicking back off the Cloverdale Resiliency Initiative. And, one of the things we'd like to be able to do is host a mini tabletop, so we figure out how we are going to operate in this COVID environment, and looking at whether there will be able to function within the EOC that's the currently designated location at the firehouse, or is there an alternative location, such as a combination of City Hall and the police department, where we have to function as the EOC. That's all things we got to be able to work through in light of COVID. Kind of the positive development is that we did get City Hall connected to the backup generator at the police department, so that's completed, and we're doing other initiatives, including getting backup power for our fueling system in our courtyard. And we've bought a new portable generator to support our water operations, as well as got some electrical work completed for our Shaham lift station, which will free up a lot of our staffing resources to help with our emergency response. And then we're also concurrently trying to address how we could support providing backup power at the Citrus Fair. We know that a permanent generator is a costly item, and it goes unused for a long period of time. That one of the things we might be able to do is just get them set up so that we can, with the transfer switch, so we can rent a generator on demand as needed and just plug it in, and then it's kind of plug and play to get them through any kind of disaster or power shut off. So that's what we're working on in light of COVID and being in the fire season, and trying to just be prepared. And this is on top of all of our other workload that we're trying to manage.
Yeah, lots of lessons from last October are being implemented. So yeah, sounds like you've done a lot of work. Did you have anything else to add, Gus?
Yeah, just I'm looking for that airplane propeller that you were looking to push me in. 'Cause I'm running to it right now. But David, you and I have had this conversation about the Citrus Fair being the designated shelter, and as far as the generated needs go, I mean, I think we or somebody should be making phone calls to the county. I mean, this is for the North County. It includes county residents, not just those that live within the city limits. I think that's something that the county could step up and help with, and maybe even PG&E. They must have generators out there that, that they surely can park one right here in Cloverdale. They can use it for the emergency charging stations and everything else. But, for the city and Citrus Fair to have to burden that expense, I think we should be looking for funding somewhere else as well. Thank you.
And I know that McGuire has been working on it because honestly, the Citrus Fair is part of the state fair network, and they have basically, cut off capital improvements for them for about a decade. And if they are to meet their goal of being a location for the local fair and being a resource for communities, then they need to be getting state funding for that. And I think that's where some of the hang up is that we point to the county and say, well, if you're a county designated resource center, then you need to be county funded. And then the county turns around and says, well, it's actually, it's a state affiliation. It needs to be funded by the state, and nobody wants to take responsibility for it. So, and in my view, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Gus, is that if PG&E wanted to solve the problem, they can back up one of the many generators that they're threatening to send to all of our substations. But by the same token, it's like if they had solar with 3 days of battery backup, then it would be something, it wouldn't just be a generator that they used once a year. It would be something that they used all the time to help bring down their energy costs all the time. So, I mean, I'm kind of disappointed that isn't the approach, because that is the solution, is that they have battery on site that has 3 days of capacity for them and they're recharging every day. That should be the goal. So yeah, I mean, if we need a legislative solution to this, we need to talk to our state legislators, because it's just ridiculous. Yeah. This is bigger. This is way bigger than we are.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. If they can have a 3-day battery backup and cut down their PG&E bill throughout the year, they should be looking at that as an investment.
That is the solution. I mean, that's the solution for all of our municipal buildings, and to cut down our costs, because battery prices are just plummeting. It's Moore's law in action, and we're right there. And that really needs to be the solution. Hopefully they're not paying PG&E. Hopefully they're paying Sonoma Clean Power for their energy, but who knows? They might have opted out of Sonoma Clean Power, but that really needs to be what we're pushing, and on all levels, is that's what needs to be funded for the Citrus Fair, whether that funding comes from the state or from the county. Because I mean, when you look at it, we can't pay for it. It's not our property; it's their property. So, and where's the Citrus Fair board on doing their part to do the lobbying, to find the funding to improve their facility, because their facility, they own it.
I just want to add something real quick, Melanie. I don't disagree with you at all. I think one thing we have to be careful of is when PG&E does utilize that, it comes with a lot of benefits to our community. It might not be permanent solutions, but they're there and they provide a wonderful resource. And I would say the same about the county. When the county declares this a shelter, it comes with all of the resources and things that we request for. which is hugely beneficial also. So I agree with you on every level, and I think the lobbying needs to be about a permanent solution that regardless of an emergency, it is there no matter what.
No, and I agree. I mean, that's the thing, is that's what we found out when we became the accidental shelter.
Right.
Which, you know, and that's why the county was they were mad at us and like, well, we didn't do this.
Right.
You know, PG&E opened their charging station at the Citrus Fair, and then word got out. And it became the de facto shelter, which, you know, it turned out to be a real positive for the community, because it was a place where people could come together and get information, but it was not a sanctioned county shelter. That's why we didn't get any resources. So, yeah. You know, I mean, we just got to stop putting Band-Aids on this stuff and find real solutions. But if the county wants it to be their North County shelter, then they need to get on, you know, putting solar panels and making sure that they've got solar panels on the vets building and battery backup, that they're lobbying and getting solar panels and battery backups at the fairgrounds, and Sonoma County Fairgrounds included, Sebastopol, everywhere. It has to be everywhere, because we don't know we need to lobby that out of our own self-interest, because we could very well all end up in Santa Rosa, or they could all end up here. We're on this together.
Madam Chair, you're absolutely correct. And you know, in terms of the MOU, you know, that's why I specifically mentioned, you know, the county having a part to play, because I think it strengthens the Citrus Fair to have that MOU with us and to have it be officially, you know, designated as part of the EOC in terms of grant applications, in terms of funding from us, but also funding from the county, and identifying it as a critical facility via PG&E for some of their programs, you know, like the SGIP to help get, you know, more resilient measures put in place. Because you're absolutely right. You know, ultimately what we need is we need battery backup systems on our facilities. And both Kevin and I have been working, for instance, with directly with Tesla to get some backup commercial battery systems on our pumping stations on Foothill, and also one of our pumping stations over on Clark Street. They're still doing the analysis, but you know, hopefully we'll be positioned to be able to get it fully funded through the CPUC and Tesla to get those systems put in place. But those, you know, kind of, at least my perspective is, let's get the city taken care of and prioritize first, but then, you know, work on these MOUs and other things that will help you know, Citrus Fair and the Veterans Hall be positioned to also serve as critical facilities in our community.
Yeah, and that's a smart spending of the money, because it's not just using it for an emergency, it's using it to lower our costs and do demand smoothing all the time. And then when we do have an emergency, the power's there as well. So yeah, that's definitely the direction. But sorry that I talk about getting on a soapbox, Gus. I got on mine, so it's your turn next.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you get a free pass. Let's see. Did we cover 1 and 2?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And any other comments or anything from the public? Okay. With that, we'll move on to item C, update on Sonoma County homeless emergency response.
Madam Chair, no updates. We're continuing a holding pattern. We haven't met since we've been in shelter-in-place mode.
Okay, I did send out the email with the Rising Waters webinar. I think it is next week. It's the program with Sonoma State, and it's the intersection of water and homelessness. So if you have a spare couple of hours and you would like to learn more about that topic, that's a great one to sign up for. And so with that, we'll move on to item E, update on pension liability legislation.
I'm not aware of any up-to-date legislation at this point. Though on July 15th, CalPERS did report their investment return for fiscal year 1920. It does look like it did underperform based on what their needed discount rate of 7% is. It came in at a 4.7 net return for the period that ended June 30th. So it's not a bad return by any means, but it certainly is not meeting the discount rate that they're projecting to achieve, the targeted return rate. So I anticipate there will be, more discussions about the impact on the economy from COVID and the market.
Yeah, not a big surprise. Any questions, Gus?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. And
Madam Chair, we skipped over
what did we?
6D.
Oh, wait a minute. D? Oh, we did. Sorry about that. Measure P update.
Yeah, that's in the Measure P report is in your packet. It shows the taxes collected through May, as well as annual permits in June. So I don't know if we should have received June by now, but I think when the packet went out, it predated the month. So there's probably some additional revenue that our finance team is currently tabulating, but that's a running total.
Right, we received 14,000, almost 14.5 more than what's on this report for June payments.
Do you have any questions, Gus?
Not about the report per se, but where are we with California Wellness? Have we heard anything from them on the at this point?
Kevin, can you chime in on that?
Yeah, sure. They have a current building permit that they pulled quite a few months ago, and I don't know if they've accomplished any progress towards remodeling. I can find out, Gus, and I'll let the group know. I can check in with Mark.
Well, I just want to make sure that they're in compliance because I was under the impression they had a 6-month window to begin construction, and I think we're well past that.
I'll check the dates and get back to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How would the stay-at-home order impact that 6-month period, David?
Yeah, of course, we didn't address that in the regulations. I think are they making reasonable progress is kind of the metric. They had made progress, moving forward with the permit, but I'm just not clear on the performance of the work. Last I heard, it was related to some unique upgrades in the fire sprinkler system that were required, and it was maybe a little bit challenging to get that work performed in the context of COVID. And so I get that's Kevin probably just needs to get an update from Mark Harris on where they're at on that particular issue.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of report we're going to want at this subcommittee is just, I mean, if we all know the letter of the law is 6 months, but I don't think anybody's finishing building projects as projected, before this. So that's kind of I think that's the context. We're just looking for some context around where they're stuck and what they think their timeline would be.
Right.
Yeah. It's not a good time to be not a great time to be starting a business. I did have a question for Susie, though. I mean, I know you can't give us the details, but how's the cannabis market amidst COVID?
It does not seem to be slowing down.
Okay.
Well, for May 2020, we're considerably higher than, it was the highest month on record since Measure P has been collected. So
Right, some of that was past due though, past
Yeah.
due payments that were made in May that got caught up.
Yeah, I was wondering kind of if you could put that in context. Okay, but it wasn't bad.
No, they seem to be fine.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Do we have anybody, Irene? No? Okay, great. Well, then we will, does that put us on to losing track? We did E. On F, I think that update on development of draft ordinance, I think we need to just take this off the agenda for the time being until we're on better financial footing. So unless there's an objection from the mayor.
I'm fine with that.
We can strike that. And then local preference policy, where are we on that?
yeah, I know I sent out information to our city staff to garner their input. We do have within our muni code some local preference language, and I've talked to the city attorney about it. But staff needs to do additional research and bring that back to the subcommittee. It's just something that we need to devote time to. It's been sitting out there, and we need to bring it back. So it's just with everything going on, we haven't presented the alternative.
I won't be home until around.
Oh, you're live, Gus.
Thank you.
Happens
I was just about to get mushy. Thank you.
Aw, we miss you too. Anyway, okay. Well, thank you for the update. I think we'll look forward to getting more information on that. Just in interest of economic recovery, I think we want to do everything we can to buy locally and see where if we can change policy where we can. So that will move on to pending items. Anything pending? And actually, I will on future agenda. Are there any future agenda items, Gus? I do have an update for you on a funding issue for street.
Okay. No, I'm fine.
Okay. I would urge you to stay tuned on the wider issue of funding street and road repair in Sonoma County, because it's a changing, it's ever changing. Of course, you've probably seen that North Bay Business and a couple of other organizations have come out against any and all ballot items, including the renewal of the SCTA quarter sales tax initiative, which is supported unanimously by the council. We have been meeting, and the full board actually will meet after the option to withdraw the measure passes, and we'll make that announcement on Monday. But the so-called business groups, most of whom are construction and many of whom are road construction, and who actually have a financially vested interest in seeing at least the SCTA renewal pass, they seem to have completely lost their minds, and I'm putting it mildly. There seem to be, they're working against their own self-interest here. And so we will see what our existing quarter cent sales tax, what's going to happen with that, which may change how we want to frame this future agenda items around, how we're going to fund our own street improvements and paving. So we'll need to watch that very closely in the next couple of days. Is there anything else from staff on that item?
We may want to put in a standing item regarding our local ballot measure, and just be able to get status updates or reports on that. Irene, I don't know if you can share with us whether it's been our ballot language and ballot argument have been submitted yet, or if we're still waiting to finalize that before they're due at the end of the week.
And we'll know, we'll probably know more after the Board of Supervisor meeting what the level of opposition will be from the business groups. Sorry, I have to put it in quotes because I think they're kind of operating against their own self-interest. But we'll have to see what if they're going to take on and write and oppose to every ballot measure, or if they get their way with the County of Sonoma and the City of Santa Rosa, because they're basically just PO'd at them. And we are as usual, we are collateral damage. We'll see what happens at that level and find out, and we'll probably know more as to whether or not either way they're going to go after all renewals or all revenue measures. So we'll know more after this. But yeah, we need to have that as a standing item, because we need to have a strategy to we have to be ready to have a strategy to answer any opposed items on the ballot.
Well, I was listening to the supervisors meeting this morning, and they've decided to go ahead and put it on the ballot. So they're not.
SCTA, did they decide on the SCTA measure and the mental health measure? I was on it or called.
Well, I guess it was just a mental health issue that they're going to move forward with.
Okay. That just made things very interesting.
Yeah, so then and Keith Woods was actually one of the phoners that called in, and he expressed his concerns, and but I was glad to see the Soups move forward with it, and we'll see. The only problem with the mental health initiative that I have is, there's just, give the voters an idea. How much are you going to spend for additional staffing to help these folks? And are you spending money for housing to get them off the street? Just to provide mental health services as an outpatient, I don't think it works. Some of these folks need to be institutionalized, and I'm sure the chief would agree with some of that. But it's a question of, I don't think it's going to be enough money what they're looking for.
Well, in case anybody is wondering where the correlation between the mental health measure and our little street improvement and paving measure is, the fact is that, whether or not it's going to, the amount of opposition to that measure is going to dictate the amount of opposition to our measure to address our needs locally. And unfortunately, we are collateral damage in this basically, Mothra versus Godzilla fight that's happening right now, and we're like the little people running around underneath the monsters trying to get out of the way. So
I agree. Yep.
So the next week or so is going to kind of dictate our direction on both our little measure renewal and any funding that we want to be able to do locally in the future.
Okay.
So there we have it.
Okay.
Sonoma County politics. Let's hear it, everybody.
Yay.
Yay. Anything else for future agenda items, Gus?
No. Kevin, you want to reach down and give Mark a kick, let him know the meeting's over?
Will do.
Will do. There you go. All right, any items for good of the order besides rousing our city engineer? Okay, I don't see anything.
The conversation has been stimulating. Thank you.
Yes.
We just wanted to hear from the annex, so.
That's it.
Well, with that, since if there are no other items, we will adjourn to our next meeting, which is Tuesday, September 1st. Are we going to say that we're going to officially change the meeting time to 1 p.m. For now, because that seemed to have been the consensus.
I'm fine with it. Whatever time of the day you want to do it. I know we always look to move them later into the evening so that when folks get home from work, they could attend the meetings. But now that everything's on Zoom, I'm not so sure that that's an issue anymore.
I'm wondering, because it just seems to bump up against the planning commission meeting. And if we have a big meeting like we had today, so do we need to agendize it for the next meeting, which will be a special meeting at 1 o'clock?
Sounds good.
Irene's nodding. She's like, yeah, okay. All right, well then let's put that on a future agenda item that will, at least for the time being, we're gonna move it. I think it makes a lot of sense. All righty, and with that, we will adjourn. Everybody stay well.
Thank you.
Have a good planning commission meeting.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye.